my children, and welcome to another year of Longbox of the Damned! Horror and science fiction don't always get the respect they deserve, my children. Genre fiction, as it is called, is often derided and mocked. But the movie Alien was a critical darling. Oh, and surprise, surprise! So was its comic adaptation. Indeed, Alien, the illustrated story, has been called the greatest movie-to-comic adaptation ever made. Produced by Heavy Metal magazine, even becoming the first comic book to appear on the New York Times mass-market bestsellers list. But does such a work as this still have the same power? Do the pages of this adaptation grab hold of your face and burst through your chest to explode your heart? Well, I like to think so. But of course, around here, my children, I like to give a summary of the plot. So if you're already familiar with it, be patient as I recount the story of Alien. It starts with the ship. The ship and the silence. The ship, the commercial mining vessel Nostromo, comes to life as it detects a strange signal on an unexplored planet. Procedure demands the motley crew to investigate, lest they forfeit their earnings, and thus they are brought out of cryogenic sleep to take a peek. On this moon, identified only as LV-426, they find a crashed alien vessel. A big alien vessel! This, my children, truly shows the grandeur of comic book art. The tiny orange figures compared to the massive horseshoe of a spaceship before them. Inside, they find the fossilized remains of a single crew member, as well as a bunch of strange eggs. One member of their team, Kane, peeks his head at the opening tip of one of the eggs, and something leaps out and grabs onto his face. Oh, don't worry. It just wants to give you a great big loving hug for answering the distress call. I must say, they're a very polite species. Kane is brought back to the ship and examined by Ash, the ship's recently brought on board science officer. The creature has a very interesting defense mechanism if they try to cut it off of Kane's face. Acid for blood that eats through 3 deck plates before finally stopping. However, it soon lets go of Kane's face on its own and dies. The second in command, Ellen Ripley, is worried about what could happen to the dead creature as they examine it, but Ash thinks it's safe to assume that it's not a zombie. Perhaps, but that's also very disappointing for me. Later, after Kane's awake, he settles down to eat some food with the crew. But it seems the food doesn't agree with him, as another alien bursts out of his chest and goes running. Well, now I'm doubly disappointed because I don't think Kane's going to become a zombie either. They chase after the tiny thing, but poor engineer Brett learns that it has gotten a wee bit larger in the intermediate time. Aw, my children, you all grow up so fast! Captain Dallas tries to force it via the air ducts into an airlock, hoping to eject it out into space. They try to track it with primitive motion sensors, but soon they can't determine from what direction it's approaching him from. Until it's too late. Confused by Ash's inability to come up with real solutions to stop the alien, Ripley investigates and discovers that the company they work for deliberately sent them there to retrieve it, even if it means the crew dying. Ash has been working for them to try to keep the creature alive, and he attacks her, trying to murder her. Fortunately, the others are able to get ahead of him. Yes, it seems Ash has secretly been an android this entire time. They learn from his decapitated head that they have no chance of fighting the alien, so they elect to blow the ship up and escape in the shuttle. During their preparations, though, the 2 remaining crew, aside for Ripley, are slaughtered by the alien, although she is able to go back and rescue the cat. Yeah, I'd go back for one of these too. She makes it off the ship, but unfortunately there's a stowaway, the alien taking a nap on a shelf. She finally blows the thing out into space, where it tries to crawl back inside via the engines, and discovers why that was probably a bad idea when it takes a face full of fire. Don't worry, alien, this is just their way of hugging back. Isn't it nice and warm? Alien, the illustrated story, lives up to its hype. It is quite possibly the greatest comic adaptation of a movie ever made, capturing the dark horror of the situation with only the embellishment of making the alien larger than it is in the movie. But that simply adds to the terrifying nature of the threat. The pacing is perfect on the artwork, both accurate and detailed. The story adapts all the necessary scenes from the film and leaves nothing important out. Truly, more movies deserve such an expert treatment as this comic. But of course, this was just the adaptation of the beginning of a long, beautiful franchise of horror and glory, my children. And you needn't worry, like it, this was just the start of a long, beautiful tradition that we have had for years now. 30 more days of illustrated stories to go. From the Longbox of the Damned. Spiraling salutations, my children! We have seen Junji Ito as an absolute master of horror when he creates his own original stories. But what happens when he works with a classic chiller? Behold! Junji Ito's Frankenstein. The hardcover collection features other stories besides his version of Frankenstein, but for our purposes we'll focus only on his recounting of the tale. For the most part, especially for the first 3/4 of it, it follows very closely to the book, my children. A sea captain discovers the near-dead Victor Frankenstein near the North Pole, seeking out fame and notoriety for himself. A cause that Frankenstein sympathizes and fears given his own history. He recounts his life to the captain, how at a young age he was enamored with natural sciences and tales of alchemy. While his dreams would have to be discarded for more practical investments of his time, upon heading to university, he met a professor who shared in his old dreams of fanciful alchemical reactions of a body's natural electricity, and plants the seeds in Victor's head to step into the territory of a god. I'd imagine that would be Echidna, the Greek mother of monsters in their mythology. What? I read other things than just horror stuff. All the stuff I read is related to horror. And thus, for his independent research, he starts digging up bodies at a local cemetery, somehow discovering the secret of life itself. And say, you know the old saying about how knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is not the monster, wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster? Well, this old guard at the cemetery would agree, spotting Victor covered in blood and with deathly eyes as he collects some body parts and proclaims him to be some kind of monster. But now for the real monster, 8 feet tall for convenience sake, and a handmade brain. Victor has an internal debate about the thing he's made. Is it an ideal human being? Yes? No? Well, a prototype is often oversized. But no, this is not a prototype. It is the ultimate creation. It is beautiful. No, it is a twisted lump of flesh. Well, Frankenstein makes up his mind on which it is when the creature comes to life, the bandages falling from its face and revealing that. It is what makes Junji Ito so perfect for this story, my children. So many movies, classic as they are, cannot truly make the monster look like anything more than a slightly lumpier person with stitches. But Junji Ito, he can create a monster. Victor passes out, his friend Henry having arrived to come to the same university and having found him. The monster is long gone, and Frankenstein believes it must have died. He recovers, but must return home when he gets news that his younger brother has been murdered. The police have arrested their housemaid, Justine, based on circumstantial evidence. But after her execution, Frankenstein sees the truth. It was his own creation that was responsible for this. He hears the monster's tail as it chows down on some grizzly bear. Nah, I prefer polar bears myself. Grizzly is a bit too gamey. After he had fled from Frankenstein's lab, the monster was ostracized and feared wherever he went due to his hideous visage. Unlike the tale of old, he discovered the family with their blind old man, learning language and social skills from them, and was forced to flee from the compassionate family when they rejected him upon sight. He discovered Victor's younger brother and Justine, enraged by their happy countenance, strangled the young boy to death and framed Justine for it. The monster, however, would like to be saved from his hellish hatred of humanity. He wants Victor to make for him another as deformed and horrible as himself, so that she would not deny him. And once again, the artwork makes it clear how frightening this being truly is, as he makes it clear that if Frankenstein refuses, he will cause pain and destruction, desolate Victor's heart so much that he'll curse the hour of his birth. And thus Victor agrees, setting off for England to try to make this monstrous mate. Once more, he scours graveyard to make this creature, a woman stitched together from many women. And in his dreams, he sees Justine and begs for her forgiveness for having caused this horror. And soon Henry discovers what it is that Victor is doing, where we truly break away from the book. Victor, ashamed of himself, asks Henry to turn him into the police for the blasphemy he has committed. But Henry is a poet and a good friend, and knows what the monster would do if Victor fails in his task. And thus the two vow to complete the mission, hopefully to finally be free of the monster forever. But they run into a complication. They cannot find a suitable head for their bride of the monster. The ones they find are too old or too decayed for the task. And so the monster himself steps in to assist with the special head he has retrieved. Justine's. Victor is once more aghast and wants to forego using the head, but Henry thinks this might be a way to atone, to grant Justine new life. Even though, as Victor points out, he still has to construct for her a new brain as he had for the monster. He vows to make this one pure, and they shall raise her up to be as sweet and kind as Justine. Although she's going to have to get used to ducking in order to get through most doorways. And thus their bride is made and awakens. They speak with her, show her her own face, and everything seems fine as she is so very calm during this whole process. But as Frankenstein removes her bandages, she grabs a pair of scissors and stabs him in the arm. She screams as she moves, whether due to knowledge of what she is, confusion at the situation, or just that anything around her is uncertain, though she's not so terribly happy to see the monster either, as he talks about living with her in harmony. She attacks the monster with the scissors, and the monster is forced to kill her, dismembering her form. The monster, angry at this whole thing, blames Frankenstein, believes that he attempted to make something that would be his doom, and vows to gain revenge upon him. The monster kills Henry, Victor's father, his would-be bride Elizabeth, and Victor goes on his hunt for the monster, bringing them to the North Pole. He wants to pursue the monster to the ends of the earth, but the sea captain must turn the ship around to spare his crew. And as Victor dies, the monster watches the ship and roars, sensing the death of his creator, realizing there is now no one, and he is alone, declaring that his suffering shall end soon amidst the snowstorm he stands in. Junji Ito's Frankenstein is glorious, with twists in the tale that would probably have made Shelley proud. Right before she looked away because of how frightening the artwork is. Mummy morning, my children! Well, evening nowadays, but it's morning somewhere. He's back from the tomb, the greatest of the horror monsters. And most certainly the most underappreciated of Marvel's monsters. The Living Mummy! Doors cannot stop him. Chains won't hold him. He's out for vengeance on the whole world. By popular demand, now in his own sinister series. You hear that? By popular demand! I am not the only one who wanted an ongoing series about mummies. The mummy Nkantu, leader of a slave rebellion in Egypt during a lost time in its history, emerges from a crate in a New York museum, alive again 1 year after the end of his previous fight. Until now, it was the only time he was truly alive in the last 3,000 years, and the sight of long-lost Egyptian artifacts in the museum fails to calm the 30 centuries of torment he has had to endure. A security guard confronts the creature caked in ancient dust, his bullets meaning nothing to him. It is only the guard's pleas for mercy that spares him a deathly fate. Sympathy for his erstwhile attacker. Dr. Scarab, the archaeologist who originally discovered the mummy, is called in to investigate the mummy's escape. He explains to the museum's curator, Dr. Harter, about the events of the previous encounter and the history of the mummy. The mummy had fallen thanks to being electrocuted during that issue. Not dead, but merely in suspended animation. Not that they realized that at the time, of course. But the electricity had a far more interesting effect on the living dead man. It restored his sanity! Yes, no longer raging aimlessly with only the faint hint of memories of his previous life, the living mummy wanders the streets, examining lights and smells, and all manner of things strange to him, with more curiosity than anything else. In fact, he does not realize just how much time has passed, initially believing it to have only been a few years since he freed his people, but soon realizes that for the area to have changed so much since his time, that it must be considerably longer. He rescues a woman being attacked in the park, wondering if these are his own people whom he has to deal with. The woman he rescued flees from him.
Me personally, I get rescued by a mummy and I want to talk to him, but maybe I'm just weird.
He believes that the bandages covering him must have made them think he was a walking corpse and tries to take off said bandages, and discovers how blistered and decayed his flesh has become with time. Indeed, he could only look like that if he had been in such a state for centuries. He does not take the news well, but neither do the police, who are soon summoned and immediately open fire upon him. But as we have established, bullets mean nothing to the living dead. He smashes through their lines and spares their lives, heading into a dark alley. The police pursue, but he has vanished. Where could the mummy have gone?
Outer space! Seriously. But that's something we'll have to talk about next year, my children. For now, remember to pay your respects to the mummy. Housewarming hello, my children! While the House of Mystery in these tales continues to be a source of more fantasy than horror, let it not be said that it does not remain entertaining. Let us see if they can escape their latest fate, shall we?
The house remains in the goblin market, and the goblins themselves are the only clientele allowed to pay for their drinks not with stories, but with gold. Mostly because their stories revolve around killing people or selling their teeth back to people after the goblins have beaten said teeth out of said people. They've been there for 6 months, and it's starting to take its toll on Fig, her family dead or lost, drinking to forget, and making bad decisions by using her admirer, Jordan, for sex because she misses her beloved Harry so much. But fortunately for Fig, something new arrives to interrupt the monotony. Or rather, something old. Their old pal Daphne, who we first saw way back in the first storyline of the House of Mystery. To reiterate her story, she was a princess in the land of witches, the Summerlands, who was sent away when a villain called the Thinking Man invaded the Summerlands. Her mother, the Queen, protected her with a spell that would only allow her to return once she found her true name, sent via True Love's kiss. Originally, her story ended with her and her familiar deciding, screw love, just enjoy San Francisco and kill anyone who jilts her.
So, a happy ending all around.
That is, until she did finally get her name back, and is now embroiled in the witch's war with the Thinking Man. She's not particularly happy to be back though, especially since her mother is quite rude and disrespectful, preferring Fig's company to her own. The witches have come to ask for the aid of the goblins in their war,
who do vote to come to their aid. Mind you, goblins and witches do have a bit of a problem fighting against flying killer robots, but who doesn't these days? The Thinking Man is a powerful foe, having also previously assaulted the House of Mystery a few storylines back, but the witches and goblins are able to repel the forces, although not helped by the fact that the leader of the goblins, Karg, is not exactly a prime strategist. The goblin friend of the House of Mystery, Tarsig, is in love with Karg, who does not return the affection, even when he helps him with battle planning and suggestions to improve their fighting chance. Back in the space between, Fig's brother, father, and grandfather work on their own plans to escape the limbo they are trapped in, especially since two of them are ghosts and all. Namely, slashing Peter Keel's throat and invoking some magic to bring them all back to life and back to Earth. Fig comes along with the witches on their quest, desperate to find some escape from the drudgery of the house, and leaves her share of it in the pirate Jordan's care to ensure that Cain does not try to meddle with things as he has none to do. The Summerlands have been devastated by the Thinking Man, its citizens massacred. While the witches take off to begin their half of the assault, Karg refuses to listen to any more of Tursig's planning, even though the other goblins start to think that maybe Karg is not as great a leader as they once thought. The royal family of witches are captured, along with Fig, the Thinking Man explaining that he had to kill all the witches. Magic is metaphor, and metaphor is falsehood. Thus magic pisses in the face of reason.
You're a man commanding an army of robots and mind worms invading a land of witches. Where the hell is the reason in any of this? Think you may want a rebranding, for this thinking thing seems to be beyond you.
The Thinking Man is more annoyed by Fig, though. First he was hired to capture her by the conception, but now they want her left alone. Fig demands to know who the hell they are, why they have such interest in her, but the Thinking Man's answers are vague, saying only that they believe that she is the key to their grand design. Ah, but they are not the only ones who require Fig's help. For you see, a stuffed animal rabbit named Walden has arrived to rescue Fig.
Again, reason does not seem to be exactly on the menu right now.
Walden comes from Stuffytown, the stuffed animal village that Fig had created in her stories so long ago. Stuffytown is falling apart as reason and logic take root. The illogic of a world of stuffed animals is dying off, and they have come for her for help. While Tursig finally challenges Karg for leadership of the goblins, and wins, Fig is able to conjure up powers from her own imagination that allows the witches to finally reclaim their homeland, though the queen must sacrifice herself for magical fire. The Thinking Man is hung by the witches, and Daphne gains control of the throne, and likewise, Tursig became a wise and great king of the goblins. Though not all stories ended happily, for when Fig finally arrived in Stuffytown, it was too late, long abandoned and everyone gone. And Fig had no idea how to fix it. And so she was forced to return to the House of Mystery, with no other home to go to. And meanwhile, the resurrected Keels all go to New York City to find a bartender, Harry, who remembers Peter quite well. Oh, and Cress goes on a time travel subplot to go reclaim the deceased poet and bring him to the bar against his will. That happened too.
The story of the House of Mystery goes on, my children, and hopefully answers will finally resolve aspects of it the next time we pay it a visit. Who are you gonna call, my children? Well, hopefully you call me. You'll never talk to me as much as you should be, my children. But any other time, you should probably call the Ghostbusters.
Well, the title of this story might lead you to believe that this haunted little Halloween story involves Samhain, the longtime enemy of the real Ghostbusters. This is actually a self-contained tale. Artie Lester, reality show huckster, is preparing his annual Halloween gala at his new home. His assistant is having a difficult time making the surroundings spooky, having decided more to emphasize the Harvest Festival aspects by placing pumpkins everywhere. However, the spookiness increases exponentially when a ghost shows up, clearly after him. While the ghost vanishes, Lester thinks this might be a perfect ratings opportunity for one of his ghost hunter shows, and so calls upon the Ghostbusters. The Ghostbusters, however, have some standards and are not interested in promoting him, especially with such a terrible track record behind him of exploitation and stepping over the bodies of others in order to get to the top. Peter really wants to take the $50,000 he's offering to deal with the ghost, especially since the season brings about a lot of false alarms for them. Egon and Ray are insistent. Janine, on the other hand, decides to step up to the plate, irritated that her recent raise is basically just a cost of living adjustment. And thus Janine steps in and begins hunting the ghost, though insists the camera stay off. Not that Lester obeys the request. Janine learns that the house was recently purchased by Lester, and that there are secret passages all over the place. Following one down, she discovers the final resting place of the ghost, an escape artist by the name of Samuel Hain. The skeletal remains are in a trap of some kind that Sam was unable to escape. On speaking of traps, it seems Janine in her rush forgot to grab one, so her neutron wand is not enough to deal with the spirit. She tells Lester to call the other Ghostbusters for assistance, and we learn more of the late Mr. Hain, how he had previously teamed up with Lester, but when the money started rolling in, Lester was only too happy to shut Hain out of the profits. The other Ghostbusters arrive to handle the situation, but down in the secret passage, Janine begins conversing with the ghost and learning his history, but in particular realizes that Sam is, well, lonely. He died alone, stuck in his trap, and naturally has been quite upset about that. It appears he's ready to let Janine go, but then the other Ghostbusters put him in a trap. She insists, however, that they release his spirit, promising to Hain that they'll give his body a proper burial. They also take the time to break Lester's camera, so none of this is recorded for him to exploit later. Unfortunately, much of the $50,000 promised is needed to be used to pay for some damage they had done, plus the burial, but hey, they got Sam Hain buried again, and wherever the dead go when not on Earth, it seems the good Mr. Hain is still entertaining them.
A delightful little ghost story, my children. It has heart, a secondary character getting some spotlight, and a peaceful resolution. It also has busting, which is quite enjoyable. Hellish hello, my children! Making deals with demons never turns out the way you hope it will. But sometimes it doesn't work out for the demons either. Especially when you've hired Kate and Kate.
That's Kate with a C and Kate with a K, to be specific. The two twin sisters are more than happy to assist you in any matters that might come up involving hell, demons, and the undead. For a nominal fee, of course. Take, for instance, a woman who was stood up at the altar by her fiancé. At least that's what all the wedding guests say happened. She, on the other hand, very clearly saw a demon dragging him down to hell. When the sisters investigate, though, they discover that the fiancé actually did stand her up by making a deal with a demon. Yes, he was her real estate business partner and planned to feed the demon her sorrow at losing her love, the demon supplying him with cash in return. He'd hide out for a while in one of their unsellable houses before he changed his identity and moved on. Fortunately, her own despair and sorrow turns into anger at all this, breaking the deal and ensuring that the demon will be feeding on his sorrow for years to come. However, we soon learn that Kate and Kate Harrow are not in fact sisters at all. Kate with a K is, in fact, Kate with a C's soul. Years ago, their mother made a deal with some demons to unwittingly sell demonic candles for people that would grant their greatest wishes, in turn allowing the demons to take their souls down to hell. When she tried to break off her employment, it merely meant they'd come for her soul instead. But in her panic, she came up with an alternate idea. Give the demons her daughter's soul instead. And thus Kate was separated from her soul, and the lively little girl became more serious and withdrawn. Eventually, she learned of what had happened to her and went to hell to retrieve her soul. But she had been away from it for too long. It had too much of a different personality than before. And thus her soul, Kate with a K, became its own person entirely and could not be rejoined with her. Kate's mother is here because the demons that wanted her soul are still after one, especially in light of losing the previous one, and thus she has come to them for help, but they are uninterested in assisting her. As such, she goes to someone more shadowy for assistance. We learn some more of Kite's backstory as an ex-boyfriend of hers, Buzz, shows up in the form of a fly. It seems that when she was first trying to figure out how to retrieve her soul, she had started dating Buzz and joined his own group of friends, trying to learn what she could about hell and the demonic. However, it turns out that Buzz and his friends were a coven who regularly sacrificed innocent souls to a demon. And said demon was not so happy when they delivered to him a person without a soul, and thus took his vengeance out on the group. Buzz is here because his demonic master has been consumed by a liquid darkness that is eating up hell, a river of shadows that is cutting off the world from hell. It would seem, however, that it is not just hell that is affected by this calamity, but heaven too. A group of angels fall from the sky, vanishing soon after impact, and the Kates meet up with the angel Gabriel, who explains the larger problem at hand. When God first declared, "Let there be light," he accidentally created the first shadow, darkness imbued with a small part of the omnipotent power of the Lord. Since then, the shadow has slowly been plotting and scheming, wanting to return the universe to its state before there was light. It has drowned hell in shadows and put a wall of darkness around heaven, isolating the universe. The first shadow attacks, even managing to get Gabriel to its side by promising to return its wings. And its plans somehow require the Harrow sisters' mother, who demands that Kate be protected from its onslaught. And so the sisters are sent to where they can't do any harm to it. Heaven!
Exorcisters is a fun, playful little time, my children. Dark humor, and darkness in general, abound in this little tale. So check it out with as little light as possible. Creepy compliments, my children! It's that time again! Time for the finest in illustrated horror. Let's read what we have in store for this year's installment of Creepy.
The issue is, in fact, the 50th anniversary celebration of Creepy, and it starts off with some horror history of its own. For those unfamiliar with this person, allow me to introduce you to poet, writer, and editor Rufus Wilmot Griswold, then contemporary enemy, rival, and critic of Edgar Allan Poe. Aside from a nasty obituary written in the newspaper when Poe died, he was strangely named to be literary executor of his estate upon his death, supposedly a request by Poe himself. In this tale, though, a Mr. Usher tells Griswold that he represents a group of people who would like to see Poe's memory and work preserved, claiming to him that he is the perfect man for the job. After a bribe, Griswold agrees to do so, though his memoir of Poe is inaccurate at best, depicting him as a drug addict and madman who hated the world around him and was truly evil. But his plan backfires beautifully, since he had intended to bury the man he hated, and instead just made him more popular than ever, since people were now very interested in reading the works of someone so evil. And indeed, that seems to have been the idea, for Mr. Usher, along with several of his compatriots, seemed to be the work of the good Edgar Allan himself, wanting to be free. The hunger of poetry to be read is insatiable and never-ending, and poor Mr. Griswold saw to it that Poe would be forgotten nevermore. After an amusing story where Uncle Creepy and Cousin Eerie try to outdo the other with older and older forms of transportation, we get a classic story of creepy past. Winner take all! An old man named Scrid and a barbarian named Gart are playing cards in a desert city, and it seems poor Scrid is out of things to bet, having lost game after game to Gart. All he has left is his slave girl, Kataka, but even in that final game he loses. Squid begs him not to take away this last thing, his very soul, but the barbarian says he made the offer and bet fair and square. With that, Squid swears he will have vengeance, and that Gart will rue the day he ever saw her. Kataka is silent during their long journey to the next town, making an escape attempt or two, but otherwise being obstinate in the face of Gart, who soon finds himself under attack by strange creatures. Recognizing the mark of the creatures' heads as the same that Squid possessed, he realizes that he must have been dealing with a powerful wizard who will not stop in his relentless attacks. However, he soon finds the dead body of Squid in a caravan, and he's been dead for weeks. But how then could the creatures keep attacking him? Well, might want to ask Kataka, who swears that Gart now belongs to her, body and soul, just like he had demanded of her. And not too long afterwards, Gart arrives at the town he had been heading to play some cards, looking just as old as Squid was, with only one last thing to offer in a bet. Next up is the short 3-page story, The Man Who Walked Through Walls. Russian immigrant Borda has invented a device that allows him to become intangible and walk through walls. He quickly uses it to murder his annoying apartment neighbors and steal money. His landlady soon insults him and demands the 6 months of rent owed, but he decides to kill her too. However, the landlady's cats flee the apartment only to leap down into his own home and pull the plug on his device just as he's walking through a wall back into it, his corpse now making a lovely wall decoration. Our final tale is Over the River to Charlie. It's moving day for a family that includes 2 young daughters. They want to help with the moving, but their parents are afraid they'll get in the way and send them out back to play. They bring their dollhouse under the tree, bickering a little, when they meet a man named Charlie in the tree. He mentions he'd love to live in a house like the dollhouse, since it's so nice, even offering them some refreshment from his flask. Trees do not make for gracious living, and the only other place he can go is over the river. He makes a deal to live in the dollhouse with the younger daughter, Jo, but soon disappears when the older sister, Lisa, seeks out her father for help. And soon in her dreams, Jo sees Charlie living in the dollhouse and experiencing it. But Lisa refuses to believe, even after seeing it once herself. Years pass, with Jo maintaining that she has indeed seen Charlie in the dollhouse, even looked out of the house across where there is a river and the body hanging over it. But Jo eventually grows annoyed with living in her regular home. Lisa, angry with Jo's continual talk of Charlie over the years, breaks the dollhouse and lets out a corpse-like Charlie from it, who wants to stay in this new home he finds himself in. He attacks their father, not wanting there to be more than one man of the house, but Jo leads him away. After all, she's so sick of that house and wants to show Charlie his true house, where the two vanish into the water. There's also a collection of beautiful artwork for Creepy's 50th anniversary issue, but too much goodness to show off.
Hopefully someday, my children, we can all gather around to celebrate Creepy when it hits its 100th anniversary. Well, I know I'll be there for it. Caw, my children! It is time once more to paint your face in the colors of vengeance, black and white. Or perhaps, will something other than death prevail this day?
Detective Mark Long is dead, his eyes plucked out and his heart held in front of his face, his wife raped and murdered in front of him, and his daughters kidnapped. Naturally, his soul has cried out for vengeance, and the crow has answered the call, resurrecting him as it has done so many times before.
Hell is not a place, my children. It is a man. And until his task is complete, Mark shall be hell.
Mark, born in Hong Kong and fluent in Chinese, is the only cop in New York's Chinatown that the people will trust. Though, of course, only so far. Chinatown prefers to take care of its own problems normally, like the string of child kidnappings by sex traffickers that has struck the area. The local crime organization, the Triad, warned Mark away that they would investigate and handle it themselves, but of course he was not so easily frightened away. As his investigation got close to uncovering the people responsible, not just some Triad members acting without authorization by the families, but wealthy industrialist Arthur Meserve was tied into all this. As Mark's former partner Caitlin Murphy and her former teacher Ken Douglas take over the investigation, Mark begins his hunt with the aid of the Crow. Their first stop is the son of a Triad higher-up, said son having helped in these crimes against him. He kills the son, revealing to the other members of the Triad his connection and dishonoring the father in the eyes of the rest of the gang. The Triad still wants to handle this themselves, even with the help of the recently departed, and so send the father out to deal with Mark while they continue their own efforts. All for naught, of course. But Mark has his own problems. His memories are coming back to him, and he learns that his daughters are alive and kidnapped. And suddenly his revenge is less of a priority. He wants to find and free his daughters, though the Crow continually warns him that his only goal on Earth is to murder those who murdered him.
I'm of two minds, my children. On one hand, nothing would make me happier than if you were all safe and sound, away from such sickening beings. But on the other hand, I would prefer he make with taking such sickening beings and putting bullets inside of them. It's a balancing act.
Arthur Meserve, in the meantime, is not too happy when the cops come calling at his office, ordering his goons to murder Caitlin and Ken whenever they get an opportunity. Mark closes in on one of the traffickers, whose sister was used as a pawn by him to scout out children to abduct, Caitlin deciding to go after him too on her own initiative. Mark kills the man before she can confront him, though her cowboy antics get her suspended from the case. Not that she cares as she reunites with Mark, the two deciding to help one another to find his daughters and crack the case. Ken, however, is critically injured in an assassination attempt, raising the stakes, though their would-be attacker is taken and may be ready to squeal on Meserve. And unfortunately, the Crow finally splits with Mark when he refuses to continue the path of revenge. He warns Mark he is still dead, his injuries will not heal, his body will decay, and even the special sight given to him after his eyes were plucked out will fade, and he will rot to death within a day. With the aid of the Triad, now shamed by the people into helping Mark after their continual failures, Mark locates all the missing children, save for his daughters, who have been taken by Meserve as insurance. With all the evidence against Meserve, the cops move in to arrest him, while Mark resumes his hunt for him to get back his children. Fortunately, since this puts him back on the vengeance quest, the Crow is only too happy to restore his full powers to him. However, when both Caitlin and Mark have Meserve at their mercy, Caitlin must convince Mark not to kill him, to let him face the courts and be forever humiliated and locked away for his many injustices. The Crow eggs him on, but Mark understands. Even if his spirit cried out for vengeance, in the end what he truly wanted was justice. Sadly, as the Crow explains, no one else before has done what he has done. Its goal is revenge from beyond the grave. If he had fulfilled that, he could have carried Mark back to the land of the dead and be reunited with his wife. But now, with the bargain unfulfilled, Mark must spend the rest of eternity as a restless spirit, traveling the roads of the dead, but never getting home.
A sad ending? Perhaps. But for Mark, he got what he truly wanted in the end. Justice! Not only for himself and his family, but for all the victims. And hey, it's not like there aren't still plenty of corpses in his wake. Darkness falls across the land, my children, for no mere mortal can resist the evil of the... Chiller? Wonder what that's all about, eh?
Shining superstar Dazzler is enjoying some time at the movies, or rather not enjoying her time, for she decides she does not want to pay $5 to see a scary movie. Maniac, starring Vincent Price.
It's bad enough that you don't like scary movies, but you're already off to a bad start when you can't appreciate a Vincent Price film.
Still, despite not finishing the film, it does have an effect on her and her companion, spooked at every little thing around them, even when she's back at home. Still, she puts that behind her when she manages to score an invite to a major Hollywood party that night. She meets up with Bob Benson, and it seems it was not Maniac she saw, whatever movie that was, but rather a film called Bloody Mary, and sadly admits to not sticking around for the twist ending. He's okay with that though. He likes her look and wants her to assist in a music video he's directing with a Teddy Lingard. Her agent, Roman Nekobo, warns her though that Benson has a habit of playing fast and loose with the lives of his hired talent. Or perhaps someone is playing fast and loose with his, since his car blows up and he's thrown clear of it. He shakes it off, saying mishaps like that happen all the time with him.
Yes, expensive cars exploding for no reason truly is one of those mysteries you can just shrug off, I guess. This is why I'd never make it in Hollywood, my children.
Dazzler becomes worried that she gets the part after only a couple of dead steps, even more suspicious as the strange explosion has prompted the producers of the music video to assign him bodyguards and even push the production schedule up. Dazzler appears for the set and her makeup, and by the Longbox, she looks gorgeous! Way better than she did before. I mean, just look at the grey skin! And thus Teddy Lingard arrives in his very well-known red jacket for this music video. Spotting Benson sneak away before they can start filming, Dazzler observes him making a call to a news station, reporting of some terrible things that have happened on the set of the music video.
Yes, such terrible things. Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize y'all's neighborhood. And whomsoever shall be found without the soul for getting down must stand and face the hounds of hell and rot inside a corpse's shell.
Dazzler's first scene is up, wherein she gets to crawl out of her own grave.
The foulest stench is in the air, the funk of 40,000 years.
Benson soon realizes that Dazzler has not emerged from the tomb, nor did she have an air hose down with her. And oh no, the press is arriving! Fortunately, Dazzler uses her ability to transform sound into light and emerges from the grave, grabbing Benson's leg.
And grisly ghouls from every tomb are closing in to seal your doom.
Benson, horrified that she's still alive, flees from the set while Dazzler chases him, making unearthly moans that it's his fault that this happened. She forces him to admit that he was responsible for all the accidents, not just the ones on this set, but on his previous movies. He did it all to get publicity. And thus Dazzler takes off her makeup and reveals that she was indeed alive, having used her powers to survive down in the dirt for 15 minutes. Benson tries to flee, but Lingard trips him up, allowing the authorities to take him. Dazzler walks off to inform her agent of what has occurred, while Lingard thinks he's going to need a new director. Maybe the guy who did American Werewolf in London? That won't be ironic at all.
Whew, that was a chiller, my children. And it can chill you more than any ghoul could ever dare try. A chiller night. So let me hold you tight and share a chiller tonight. Dun 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 dun, my children. The creatures of the night have the same problems the rest of us have, and whole new ones, especially when faced with prejudice in the face of one's own police department, as in the Dead Deception.
Detective Maria Pimienta has just been assigned to work with Detective Connor Burke, a rather charming officer on the force, with one thing going for him above many of his fellows. He's a werewolf! Yes, in this world, werewolves are a real thing, although they face plenty of discrimination. Dog jokes, assumptions that they are uber-violent and ready to kill, basically any number of things that paint them in a negative light.
Though me personally, I see nothing wrong with the whole killing people thing. Some people like to make a mountain of skulls out of a finger bone.
This will be Burke's 6th partner after so many years. Most of said partners tried too hard to keep up with him and his naturally enhanced senses. Speed, strength, sense of smell, all that. And as a result, they get injured and transferred away. Maria, however, is thorough and eager to work with him. Though being a former internal affairs officer, she does wonder about the number of cold cases he has on his docket. Supernatural, otherworldly investigation cases, or snowy cases as they're called. They normally are narcotics detectives, but in this semi-futuristic world of werewolves and other phenomena, they need to prioritize the strange and mysterious. And soon their first case together forms. A young homeless girl walked into a convenience store and started eating things off the shelf. When the clerk tried to intervene, she shoved him so hard that he died when hitting the counter. The girl then took a bite out of him and vanished. Burke is very dismissive of the idea that she could be a werewolf. Her eyes are the wrong color, and even though they identify her prince as a girl named Mina, Burke seems to want to push aside any theories that Maria puts forth, and he is quite elusive when she tries to follow him one night, his attitude continually irritating her. Things are not helped by Mina showing up at the home of the clerk's wife, claiming to live there before smashing off the door and fleeing. All the evidence points to her being a werewolf, or at least on some kind of drugs, but Burke refuses to pursue such a theory. With some good old detective work though, she finds a location that might be the place where Mina is, or has an old girlfriend living out of it. She finds Mina as well as a corpse of a friend of hers, and then she licks Maria. She's unable to move as Mina begins to bite her wrist, but fortunately Burke arrives and shoots her in the head. No worries about killing her though, for he has already figured out that Mina is a vampire, who are not so open and revealed like werewolves are. Mina is young and only recently turned, so she probably doesn't fully understand what is happening to her. Due to the prejudices and assumptions that werewolves have experienced since coming out into the world, Burke was trying to protect their existence. It might be some time before such a thing occurs. He knows some people who can help Mina, keep her from accidentally killing anyone else, or feasting on the living, but it's up to Maria whether or not she'll call it in. And fortunately, she's a good egg and agrees.
Remember, my children, the things that go bump in the night are usually just people trying to live their own lives. So don't be so quick to judge such things. I speak from experience on this matter as well. So, not a weird one for you today, my children. Few stories combine with all of the stuff that's in this one. Satan 6.
So, first of all, these are characters from a short-lived shared universe invented by Jack Kirby himself, known as the Kirbyverse. In fact, Kirby himself did some of the artwork in the first issue along with the cover.
And frankly, he should have done more for it because, yeesh.
Behold our 5 main protagonists. Brian Blue Dragon, a former knight in King Arthur's employ, whose arrogance got him thrown from Camelot. Desira, a ditzy Babylonian would-be temptress. The mighty hunter Kuga, who actually loves animals and therefore does not kill any. Mad scientist Dr. Mordius. And finally, Hardluck Harrigan, a former bookie and gambler. What brings these 5 together? Well, for starters, they're all dead. What's worse, they have all, for one reason or another, pledged their souls to Satan in a contract. Ah, but the thing is that contract law is complicated, and heaven has decided that their cases are unique enough so as not to warrant eternal damnation. And thus, for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the 5 have been in purgatory, as heaven and hell have argued their case about who should receive their souls. Brian Blue Dragon, however, has finally grown too impatient of this existence, and thus demands to be freed by hell's representative, Commodius. The thing is, the 5 5 don't actually care which side gets their souls at this point. They just want out. And thus Commodius comes up with a little scheme. The 5 shall head to Earth along with a demon named Frightful, and they must make people on Earth surrender their souls into contracts, much like themselves, and hell will be happy to take them.
The concept seems fine enough on its own, my children. Certainly worthy of placement in the Longbox of the Damned. But, here's where things really start getting weird.
Our narrator is Frightful's opposite number from heaven, named Pristine, and she is an angel, guardian first class of the comic book division.
What, my children? Do you think that just because I have a hellish box of comics, that such 4-color stories are strictly the domain of darker forces?
Pristine breaks the fourth wall a lot, but not in a Deadpool kind of way where she's constantly cracking jokes. It's mostly for the benefit of the audience and saying things like, "We need to give the writer and artist a break" kind of thing. But yes, she is there to try to bring Satan 6 over to the side of light. Their first efforts relate to a professor of archaeology who has uncovered an odd insect-like sarcophagus, the gateway for a powerful creature named Calazar to emerge and bring death and destruction with it. The professor sells his soul to destroy the sarcophagus, since normal humans will not believe him about the danger they face. But of course the demons cheat him and Calazar emerges. With the help of Pristine and some bug spray, they're able to defeat Calazar, although since Frightful reneged on the contract by not giving him the right incantation to stop Calazar, and they helped save the world, the team technically failed. A straightforward enough tale as it is, but then the next issue features Lloyd Kaufman from Trauma Studios. Yes, he recruits Quasimodo, the actual Quasimodo from the Hunchback of Notre Dame, to join in on his latest outing from the disgusting schlock factory of trauma, as Quasimodo seeks out Desira. It would seem that while both were in limbo, they started a bit of a relationship, and having heard that she got out of limbo, Quasimodo had escaped so that he might join with her again. Satan 6 are sent to retrieve him, but Pristine steps in, saying that Quasimodo's own time in limbo was almost up, and since his actions were all in the name of love, he will get to be put in heaven should he desire. But he elects to stay on Earth, and in showbiz.
Honestly, the most unrealistic part of this whole scenario is that a trauma movie got a premiere at Man's Chinese Theater.
It is the final issue, though, that should make your jaw drop, my children. For if Lloyd Kaufman seems like an odd guest star, then you'll never believe who shows up in the last issue of Satan 6. Jason Voorhees. No impersonator, not some stand-in for Jason. Freaking Jason. Yes, Topps Comics had the license for Jason Goes to Hell the final Friday and did an adaptation of the movie, while also having him cameo in the first few pages of Satan 6.
So far this comic has had demons, fourth wall breaking angels of comics, people from various time periods, an alien bug from another dimension, Lloyd Kaufman, Quasimodo, and Jason Voorhees. And we're not even over yet, my children!
Jason's appearance comes about because Commodius decides to replace Frightful with a better team leader than him, and he picks Jason. True to form, Jason does not even seem to acknowledge any of this and simply attacks them before being whisked away for parts unknown.
So this is what happened to Jason after he got pulled into hell at the end of that movie? I guess Freddy Krueger had to file some paperwork or something before he could enact his own plan.
And after Jason is taken care of, Satan 6 are sent off to collect the soul they are owed. A man who gave up his soul for money and power, but must surrender it at the age of 100. He's still in good shape regardless of that age, and he and his friends fight off Satan 6, only to reveal that he is actually an old friend of the team's own Hard Luck Harrigan. Harrigan isn't very pleased with him, since he believes he abandoned him on their last caper, but the man thinks it's the other way around. found that Harrigan abandoned him before he was shot down. As such, he took the money and power meant for his soul, inspired by the loss of Harry, and used it to only do good. He gave it away, he helped people, did charity work, that sort of thing. Frightful still wants to honor the contract. But here's where we get one last unbelievable cameo, my children. Wolf and Bird, Counselors of the Macabre.
Yes, it seems Topps actually printed some Wolf and Bird stories, including a backup story in one of Satan 6's issues. So those beloved lawyers we haven't talked about in a while have an appearance here. In the same issue as Jason Voorhees.
Inspecting the contract, it seems there's a typo on it. Soul is spelled like sole of a shoe. While Frightful is unhappy at his development and still wants to pursue it, Pristine says that with all his charity work he's done with the money, he's still got a pretty free ride into heaven as it is. Despite Harry seeming to still be pissed off at the man though, it's soon revealed that he had actually altered the contract when he got a chance to, having saved his old friend, and is now happy to just hang out with his new ones.
Satan 6 is bizarre, my children. The artwork is its weakest points, but in some ways it does match the utter insanity of its contents. Gigantic greetings, my children. The 100-page giant. A chance to really give comic readers some great material at a low price. And how much better when it is full of reprints of horror material.
While most of these stories are reprints of other comics, the first tale is a Swamp Thing story that is completely original. So let's take a look at Hollow, wherein a red-headed girl runs across some trick-or-treating children. Or are they? Well, she tells them a little story about doors, primordial ones with names we can't even begin to pronounce. She just had to see what was on the other side of such a door. There's a certain meanness in the air these days, you know? She tells of how long ago goodness left this world, believing it had taught humanity enough to carry on the good fight. But goodness is far too impressed with itself. But yes, she finds the monsters on the other side of the gate. And fortunately, there are monsters on this side too, like Swamp Thing. And well, the little demon spawn masquerading as children, those monsters can be dealt with by the Swamp Thing too. Next up is a tale with a little bit of homage, but also just some fun, as Blue Devil scares away trick-or-treaters from his house so he and the Enchantress can chow down on the candy that they drop. But in a nearby pumpkin patch, two adults, one with a yellow sweater and another with a black and red striped shirt, perform the ritual to finally summon a great pumpkin creature that will allow them to take their revenge on Blue Devil. The Pumpkin Sinister, which has but one command from Harley and Dennis: kill Blue Devil! Once the pumpkin is defeated, Harley reveals what this is all about. How 25 years ago, Blue Devil stole away the little red-headed girl that he loved.
You're still pining for some woman from 25 years ago who went with another guy? Good grief.
In Kisseret Raw Tert, the Scarecrow tells a tale of when a certain sorceress who speaks in backwards speech was entertaining the children's hospital on Halloween when a child was wheeled in, hallucinating and suffering from some sort of drug. Using her powers, she was able to tell not only the horrors that the young boy was seeing, but also who had been responsible, giving out trick-or-treat candy laced with something terrible. And so she unleashed those same terrors back upon them. Although the police reports afterwards had no evidence of such demons, merely that they had fallen prey to their own addictions. Over in Strange Cargo, we see Jimmy Olsen leading Lois Lane out on a little excursion for a story for once, having gotten a tip that Lex Luthor is trying to import some kind of dangerous cargo into Metropolis. And upon opening that cargo, they find it to be zombies! Superman comes to help when he hears their cries, but finds not only that he cannot harm them because he swore never to kill, but that they have been laced with kryptonite or magic, meaning he is vulnerable to their attacks.
See, this is the problem with the cape and costume crowd, not understanding that sometimes you just have to let loose against a bunch of zombies.
Fortunately, once Jimmy remarks that the zombies are already dead, he deals with them accordingly, leaving the remaining crates full of zombies to wander on the moon.
That's going to be quite a surprising sight when we eventually set up a base on the moon.
Over to the Scarecrow again, but this time with a little twist on a classic, the Ballad of Jonathan Crane, a school teacher in Gotham in the 1800s who plans to attend a fancy gathering on All Hallows Eve. Oh, but the children should be careful. The Headless Horseman is no doubt around. And after he enters the fancy dress party in the garb of a scarecrow, he attempts to woo a rich heiress, but is scared off by a sizable man. And on the way home, he is greeted by the Headless Horseman, wearing his traditional bat logo. And to make sure that this comic is truly giant size, we have two full-length stories within it. The first, a Lovecraftian little tale that begins with a bit of grave robbing. A man who needs to inspect a dead body. He tells the police his tale of his ship capsizing, of how years ago his friend, that he was currently unburying, had once drowned in a similar storm. But like his friend, the other crew members on the boat who went down seemed to be pulled by things unearthly in nature. He was rescued by Aquaman and Etrigan the Demon, who listen to his tale and realize that they need his help. They grant him gills and the ability to survive the cold ocean depths, asking to be led down to where the others were dragged down. It would seem that horrifying creatures of the depths have begun to emerge, a regular occurrence according to the two. Every few years, something tries to emerge from the ocean depths, coming from one universe to the next, the water allowing it to survive the trauma. It sends an army of hellish creatures first, along with the dead and drowned. And that is what befell his friend. Aquaman and Etrigan fight off the creatures and its master, who even attempts to offer Aquaman command over all the land should it allow it to pass. But as Aquaman notes, he already controls 70% of the globe, so why should he settle for less? And thus, with the help of, well, a lot of sea creatures, they push back the invasion. So I dig up the body? Well, he just needed some proof of his story, since his friend's body was recovered, still holding the St. Christopher medallion it had taken from him in the ocean depths. And finally, Night of the Reaper. A fairly average Batman story with some very enjoyable elements. For instance, it takes place in Rutland, Vermont, on Halloween. Why, even in the annual parade, we see people dressed up as heroes from a different company. How the hell they got away with that is anyone's guess, but that's all well and good. Dick Grayson fights off some gang members who have assaulted someone else dressed as Robin, and murdered someone else dressed as Batman. Or have they? For another figure is stalking this night, the Grim Reaper. Later, Batman explains that he is here to assist a doctor who had survived a concentration camp to hunt down a Nazi war criminal who has been spotted in the area. They manage to find the Nazi, but the Reaper gets to him first, blowing up his car. And yes, it would seem our concentration camp survivor is responsible for this, wanting his own form of justice against the Nazi scum. Batman must still bring him in, but in his attempted escape, the poor Reaper falls to his own death.
A tragic ending for this collection, though there is at least the origin of Swamp Thing in there too. Still, some Nazis got killed, and a horrifying time was had by those of the other stories. And in the end, that's all we can hope for. She lives beyond the grace of God, a wanderer in the outer darkness, my children. We've already covered one movie adaptation at the beginning of this year with the beloved recreation of Alien. So why don't we try another classic with Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula?
And already we're off to a unique endeavor with this one, my children. The artwork comes from Mike Mignola, known of course for Hellboy. And if you got the large collected edition of this tale, it's even entirely in black and white, making for its own different sort of reading experience. But since the movie was in color, let's examine the individual issues and their color counterpart. In 1462, Vlad Dracula led 7,000 Christian soldiers against 30,000 Turks, driving them back. But his wife, Elisabetta, receives false news of his death in battle. She commits suicide, and the church officials say that with the taking of her own life, her soul cannot be saved. She is damned.
They hype that kind of thing up as being bad, but you get to party with skeletons when that happens. You ever have a drinking contest with a skeleton? It's wild.
Dracula, mad with rage over this pronouncement, renounces God and swears that if his wife burns in hell, so shall he. His form was cursed, the blood of Christ is life, and thus so shall be his wife subsumed in that same blood. 400 years later, a woman named Mina quite resembles the late Elisabetta, and is staying with her wild, extroverted, and a bit lewd friend Lucy. Mina's fiancé, Jonathan, has been made a partner in the firm he works for, now that his superior, Mr. Renfield, has lost his mind. And so he travels to Dracula's castle in the Carpathian Mountains, with the clever effects of the film making their way into the comic too. The map behind the train, the eyes in the sky looking down at Harker, and of course, Dracula's signature look of the film. While the hair is still, well, not exactly dignified, the artwork helps give it a more stylistic look thanks to the heavy shadows and black, sightless eyes. Spotting Mina's picture, Dracula recognizes his true love reborn and decides to confine Jonathan to the castle while he goes back to London in his place. While we spot Mr. Renfield in an insane asylum preparing insects and animals to either be eaten by himself or his master, Jonathan explores the castle and all of its eerie presence, for it is old and it has many memories, including Dracula's 3 vampire brides who would happily feast on him, though Dracula warns them off for now.
For all the talk of his eternal love for Elisabetta and his desire to be reunited with her, he sure seemed to bounce back quickly with 3 new girlfriends that live with him now.
Back with Mina and Lucy, the latter has finally gotten a proposal from one of her 3 suitors. The Texan Quincy Morris, the doctor in charge of Renfield, Jack Sayward, and Lord Arthur Holmwood, who made the proposal and now stands to marry her. She still proclaims to love all 3 though, leading Mina to proclaim that she can't marry all 3.
Why not? Seemed to work for Dracula.
Speaking of that figure, he arrives by boat along with his all-seeing eyes, killing the boat crew for sustenance before meeting with Lucy for a different sort of sustenance. Dracula meets with Mina in the streets, younger and more attractive in disguise, and eventually charms her. Lucy soon takes ill, the bite marks on her neck forming the eyes of a wolf. And such unusual symptoms call for a specialist friend of Dr. Sayward, Abraham Van Helsing. Upon seeing her and hearing of her symptoms, he suspects the work of the vampire, though he may be too late, as Mina continues to be wooed by the Count. Fortunately, that spell of love is temporarily broken when Jonathan manages to escape from the castle and collapses at the nunnery. Mina is sent for so the 2 can be married, and she breaks off her relationship with Dracula. In his anger and sorrow, he makes his way past Lucy's guards and finishes her off. However, Van Helsing knows that death is only the beginning for Lucy, so he takes her 3 suitors to her tomb, discovering it empty. Lucy is vampire, Nosferatu, a creature that does not die like the bee after the first sting, but instead grows stronger and becomes immortal once infected by other Nosferatu. So, of course, when they find her, clad in her burial whites, clutching a child to be her first meal, her eyes as red as the blood she craves, they force her back, chop off her head, and cut out her heart. We even get a few sequences not in the movie. for when Jonathan returns to London, in the film he merely glances at young Dracula in the streets, but here he pursues him, running into his more beast-like form that flies off into the night. Van Helsing probes Jonathan for information, learning of his various estates he's purchased. The group goes out to eliminate his boxes of earth, which he needs to sustain himself. But while they do this, Dracula goes to Mina, who is overcome with desire for him, to be like him. And thus she drinks of his blood, while he feeds from her, linking them together. However, love will do him no good if he should die, so he flees London back to his home in the Carpathian Mountains. The men pursue, having to split up when Dracula uses his connection to Mina to learn of their plans. Van Helsing and Mina dispatch Dracula's brides, while the others reach him too late. Dracula managing to kill Quincy before he too is stabbed. Mina arrives and finishes the job of ending him, though with his consent on that task. After all, mortal love has no hold on them. Theirs shall last all eternity.
It is a rare occasion when a comic adaptation of the movie can equal or surpass that film it originates from. But I would argue, my children, that this comic is most definitely equal to the Coppola film, proving yet again that this medium stands in glory alongside others. Freaky fettuccine, my children! Creepypastas have been a thing on the internet for quite a while. I like it that so many are happy to share around scary stories with each other, but I wish those stories could have some comic form. How fortunate that a YouTuber named Mr. Creepypasta decided to do just that.
Presented in anthology format by the mysterious and tubed Blue Man, he shows those who have accessed his little dark corner of the web a pair of creepypasta stories, starting with He is the Rake. A man named Andy sits up in bed, to the confusion of his wife Jill, who spots the reason why he's staring in terror. A creature sitting at the end of their bed, with sharp little hands and a horrifying grin. It scratches his face and then leaves. But then Andy walks out of bed, picks up a knife, and tells his poor, confused wife that the creature is the Rake. And then slits his own throat. However, as he dies, all he tells Jill is that it spoke her name. At the funeral, a man named Daniel Huff meets with her and wants to know about the Rake, and warns her that they must take precautions since it'll be coming after her next. Later, he tells her how 8 years ago, the Rake came and did the same thing to his wife, hypnotized her until she jumped off the roof. According to Daniel's research, the Rake has existed as far back as the 17th century. He wants to use Jill as bait to lure in the Rake, which she is less than enthusiastic about and wants to call the police. But since Daniel is obsessed, he drugs her and stays up waiting for him. The Rake arrives as predicted, but he becomes hypnotized as well, unable to shoot it as it looks at him. After it leaves, it keeps him frozen so that Jill can get up and shoot herself with his gun, but warns him that it spoke his name to her. Still, we shouldn't feel too bad for Daniel. He was motivated by revenge, not out of any noble sentiments to help Jill.
Although personally, I'm always up for a good bit of revenge from the dead myself.
Next up we have I Waited Inside Her Closet. At Parker Penitentiary, Dr. Maroney is brought in to speak to Oscar O'Hara, a dangerous criminal that the warden is worried she will transfer to a minimum security facility. Psychologists have already determined that he was sound of mind when he went on a massive killing spree, but Dr. Maroney wants to speak to him privately. Or at least with a bunch of big orderlies with her. The two speak, happy to do an interview because it's promotion for his upcoming book deal. Yes, the publishers say it will be a bestseller, in fact, and his work will be remembered. What work is that, you may ask? Killing people, obviously! He wanted his own signature on it, so he carved an O into his victim's face as a signature of sorts. The media began calling him the Ring Killer.
I think Samara or Sadako may want to sue somebody.
After killing 13 people, he got caught, but in very strange circumstances. He had been stalking a woman for weeks and hid inside her closet. Before he attacked, he watched her stripping down to her underwear, wondering what else she would take off. And that turned out to be her skin! The creature, possessing only a giant mouth in the middle of its face, heard his shocked exclamation and chased him out of the house. Some passerbys wonder if he's okay, but then the woman he was stalking came out, skin and all, saying that he was trying to kill her, and thus he was caught. However, the truth will not be coming out, for it turns out Dr. Maroney and her orderlies are the same race as this would-be victim, and intend to keep him locked up forever, heavily sedated, so the world will never find out about the truth. But then again, the Blue Man's watchers may have their own truth to experience after seeing such terrifying tales.
Creepypastas are wonderful, my children. Horror stories spread and enjoyed by those of you out there. Just like I always want all of you to enjoy this show. Man-Monster Morning, my children. Time to take a peek back at anthology comics of old, when each issue premiered a different new character. So behold, Tales of Evil featuring Man-Monster.
At the photo shoot for a women's lib magazine, a former Olympic swimming winner named Paul Sanders is boasting to the girls about his body. But muscle men just put them to sleep. They want something more exciting. I'd say go for that giant monster in the background, but I'm pretty sure that's only there for our benefit. Since they're not interested in Paul, he brings them out to his father's oil refinery. He goes for a swim near it to try to impress the girls, who are still less than interested in some washed-up swimmer. However, the drill bit strikes something in the ocean, a cavity within it containing a bacterial force that reacts to algae, and forms a wave of water that coats Paul in the stuff. He is pulled underwater for a time before being brought back up, rescued by the girls. But when they return to port, scales begin growing all over his body until he has become the Man-Monster! He collapses from the experience, and the blonde, Dusty, wants to get him to a hospital, but the black-haired woman, Liz, thinks this is the story of the century and doesn't want the news to get out before they can report it in. At the hotel, he's placed in the shower and hot water turned on him, which transforms him back into a normal human, and he collapses again.
Man-Monsters spend a lot of time sleeping. They're kind of like cats in that way.
While Dusty heads off to find a doctor for him, Liz takes a nap. Only for a masked man named Hellblazer,
John Constantine,
to arrive and offer Paul the chance to get back at his rich father. The two apparently know each other, Hellblazer having offered him money to throw a race in the Olympics. But as much as Paul wants to do something against his father, he refuses and gets blasted, only to transform once more into the Man-Monster. He drives off the Hellblazer, but feels compelled to stay behind and rescue Liz in the next room. Paul Sanders' father arrives, since he owns the hotel, and demands the nearby police open fire on the Man-Monster, leading to a cliffhanger. But we are not yet done, for one story of monstrous creatures is not enough. Let's meet the Bog Beast. It is an almost skeletal creature that was sent by beings underground. Also, a news reports a vampire at large, so that's a +2. He investigates an observatory where everyone has been murdered. The Bog Beast laments that he must flee the scene, for the humans will assume that he is the killer, whereas he is but an explorer, a scientist.
More scientists should be skeletons. They're more underrepresented in STEM fields than you would think.
He finds a woman who is still alive and starts bringing her to a city. But later in the moonlight, the woman transforms into a werewolf and attacks. He is forced to kill her to survive, but nearby, humans catch up with him and are able to capture him, trapped in a net and tranquilized. Like the man monster, he is at the mercy of the regular humans.
Two tales of monsters, my children, who are secretly regular humans in more grotesque shapes. I hope you take this lesson to heart, that all monsters are people too, and must be treated accordingly. Save the planet, my children! While of course we discuss the misunderstood monsters around here, the ones we are meant to simply sympathize with, but everyone hates and fears them, sometimes it's just nice when the hero of your story really is just a murderous monster.
Meet Vala, a vampire who has recently emerged into the land of the 21st century after having been away for quite a while. She is fascinated by how people these days seem to like their electronic boxes, in particular when they're cam girls happily gaining money from their watchers for stripping down and grinding around. With the help of Toby, a nerd who she decapitates when he takes her photo unexpectedly, and subsequently resurrects using her blood, she has set up her own little cam girl service so she can get some money to buy herself a proper home and appreciate the finer things in life. It's not easy. Actually, it's very easy, even when a mobster's son empties the family fortune on her, thanks to her hypnotic powers. The goons sent to assassinate her just end up with their own heads cut off. New things for Toby to juggle with.
See, she's getting all this cam girl money, but if she learned how to juggle, the internet would have their new queen.
With all the money she acquires, she happily buys Castle Bran, legendarily owned by Count Dracula. With the finest place for her to live out her days peacefully, we learn Vala's backstory. How she was a fisherwoman in a village 100 years ago, but she was bitten and enslaved by a vampire and his 3 brides. She was forced to clean up after them, feeding off merely scraps of their kills and the occasional rat. Fortunately, his immortality led to his utter stupidity by giving her a mop with a wooden handle. She staked him, then cut off the heads of the brides, bathing in their own blood. With that, she leapt into the ocean to begin a new life. Not needing to breathe, nor being restricted by human motion, she lived her life under the sea, befriending a lovely shark and even wearing a dress that was actually a jellyfish. For 100 years she lived, fought sea creatures, and survived away from the sun in the ocean depths. But one day, a blackness surrounded her, killing her shark friend and forcing her to finally return to the surface to gain vengeance, sadly having to abandon her jellyfish dress too. However, soon Toby notices something strange. One of her fangs is slowly turning black. She suspects it is stained, possibly infected by the black cloud she encountered under the water, and soon discovers the source of the original cloud, an oil platform that had spilled its contents by accident, killing everything in the water. She transforms into a shark and uses her specialized knowledge to destroy the platform, but that is not enough. She takes her revenge out on the greedy CEO of the oil company, using her hypnotic powers to drown himself in jello, then go after senators, tycoons, and eventually even the President of the United States, decapitating him from a distance on live television. With such a threat to national security, and recognizing that Vala has supernatural powers, the National Security Agency recruits some more mystical individuals to help take Vala out. First up is a man who does a thorough job of taking Vala down. Someone who claims to be the son of an angel and a human woman, in particular Samael, the angel of death. He carries with him a giant Bible of mystical power, claiming it to be the true Bible, the translated ones existing because the true Bible's power and might are too much for ordinary humans to handle. He laughs off her mission to try to save the Earth, saying that they're merely figureheads, that they'd just be replaced anyway, and even then, the resources used by man, like oil, are a part of nature, and thus okay to be used by man. But before he can finish the job, help arrives. Her jellyfish dress! It saves her and allows her to drink his blood and restore her strength. But she has little time to recover, as the NSA already had a backup in case he failed. Some kind of alien pope with powerful space weapons.
Don't look at me, my children. I just tell you what's in these things.
Both Toby and her poor jellyfish are killed, rained down by holy water. And ironically, she must take refuge in the Half-Angel's giant Bible for protection. And as the humans launch their final assault, a nuclear missile, Vala reads from the unknowable text, saying hello to it before the nuke hits. And thus, while the US government believes that they have won, on the moon, Vala begins walking with a giant Bible in hand.
They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, my children. But I say hell has even more fury when it's over the death of the sea life she called friends. Stop motion salutations, my children! Time to continue on the story of everyone's favorite little killer dolls, Andre Toulon's legacy, and their puppet master.
When last we left off, the puppets and their master, Anthony Gallagher, had finally defeated Anapa, the demon responsible for the power to transfer souls into puppets to begin with. We begin with a bit of a teaser for things to come. Someone who's been waking up in other people's bodies, only to be murdered by puppets, by Camille, who's in the middle of stabbing people in a restaurant, and even with Neil Gallagher, father of Anthony and the villain of the first movie. Speaking of Anthony, it has been 6 months since the end of the last storyline, and he has been busy. He's figured out how to create the serum that keeps the puppets alive, and with Toulon's notes, found a way around using brains as an ingredient.
Which is good for him, but disappointing for me.
And has been developing his psychic powers, drawing in the puppets into a mental theater that he can use to have conversations and meetings. Although Toulon never seems to come to the theater. Meanwhile, a couple named John and Cindy Maplethorpe have purchased the Bodega Bay Inn and refurbished it, making it into a viable hotel again, and things couldn't be better. Well, as long as you're a good person anyway. If you're a bad person, Anthony threatens you with the puppets. Like when an abusive man who is more than a bit freaked out when Blade slashes at his foot. In addition, someone in a car crash gets to the hotel. The Maplethorpes, being kind, even treating Anthony like a son after they found him squatting in the hotel, let the man stay for one night as he tries to figure out what has happened to him. Anthony doesn't trust him and has the puppets follow him. And he goes outside and digs up a box that had been buried near the hotel. And while his father meets Camille for the first time, the mysterious man passes Anthony and calls him by name. But that's neither here nor there, for more importantly, Torch shows up without a head. Investigating, he finds Leech Woman and Decapitron equally decapitated. The souls of the puppets have no explanation, not helped by the lack of the Toulon's presence in the theater. However, while the soul for Shredder Khan claims that he would investigate this, it seems he recognizes the man and even helps him, providing him a special ring. While a group of luchadors arrive to stay at the inn, one even spotting Pinhead and giving him a tiny luchador mask, the mysterious man finds the abusive husband from earlier and murders him, seemingly using Blade and Tunneler to do so. Neil Gallagher gets Camille to join forces with him, which involves slicing her dummy body in half. After the manager of the Luchadors tries to assault Cindy Maplethorpe, Anthony decides to take justice into his own hands, having Blade and Pinhead murder him. Meanwhile, we discover what it was that the mysterious man used to kill the abuser. The retro puppets! Something is sadly wrong with Anthony though, for while the luchadors discover him over the manager's body, he starts ranting to the souls of the puppets, proclaiming that they should never have let anyone come to the hotel. And he wants them all dead, unleashing the puppets on the hotel's customers. The luchadors, whom Anthony was a fan of, try to convince him to stop this, but they too sadly fall prey to his anger. Cindy spots all this and cannot believe what he has done. But then the mysterious man comes out and reveals that he is Andre Toulon. After suggesting what they do with the bodies, he reveals that he has been bouncing from body to body for 6 months now, starting during the fight with Anapa. But since Decapitron was only damaged last night, who has been in it? Well, we soon see, as a puppet that has been stalking around the hotel during the storyline takes Decapitron's head and attaches a new head and arm to it. Those of one of Anapa's puppets. Yes, Anapa himself has possessed the body, and his servant in this puppet body is Madame Madon, the fortune teller from earlier in the Puppet Master comics, who had separated the puppets into human bodies. Cindy tearfully asks Anthony and the puppets to leave. They can't have anything like this in the place, especially after they have invested all of their money into the inn. Andre reunites with the souls of the others, and they make it clear that Anthony needs to part ways with them. The weight of the Puppet Master is a heavy one, and many of their former masters have fallen to it, which has led them to kill said masters, and they do not want to have to do that to Anthony. He checks himself back in at the Boldeston Institute and asks to be put in solitary confinement. But it seems Director Crow has her own agenda, as she is working for the Nazis from the Axis trilogy, who have been amassing quite the collection of their own puppets. While the puppets begin a hunt for their own new enemy, Andrew sets out for West Virginia, seeking something that had been stolen from him a long time ago.
Anthony may be out as the Puppet Master, but the puppets themselves aren't out just yet. So don't cut your strings just yet, my children, for we shall revisit the Puppet Master at some point. Bloody Merry morning, my children. Have you ever considered what you would do with immortality? How long it would take for you to become bored with life? Well, perhaps you should be asking, Bloody Mary.
Ciro Rosario Di Maria, or Maria for short, is a teenage priest who must contend with vampires every night when he goes on walks. All strangely seem intent on his murder, though fortunately, up until now, he's done a fine job repelling them with a cross he carries. And yet lately, they have decided that they are not afraid of him. Mostly because they have discovered that he does not possess the power of exorcism. However, one night during an attack, a red-headed vampire boy shows up and protects him after getting to drink a little of his blood. Later, the vampire, named Mary, exclaims that he wants one thing: for Maria to kill him. Yes, it seems Mary has himself a little problem with dying. Stab him with a cross, leave him out in sunlight, it doesn't matter. He cannot die despite all the classic vampire tricks, and after 400 years of life, he's kind of sick of it. Apparently, Maria is descended from Isaac Rosario Di Maria, who was well known in his time for being prolific in the power of exorcism. And it's something that was supposed to be passed down throughout his family members, and yet Maria has heard nothing about it at all. The two make a deal. If Mary protects Maria from the vampires that would attack him, he'll figure out a way to kill him, even providing a little blood so that Mary can be fully energized when he needs to fight. Though Mary is a little hesitant about that, since he cannot remember why he does not want to drink blood, only that he hears the name Bloody Mary in his head, and that it is tied into why he wants to die. The two go to Maria's school library, owned and operated by the rich and powerful Sakuraba family, hoping to find some ancient knowledge on its condition or on the power of exorcism. But some of the books they attempt to consult have been burnt or had pages torn out. And recently at that. They meet with the school council president, Takumi Sakuraba, who is annoyed by Maria's association with the vampire, but also claims to know nothing about the power of exorcism. A fact that he lies about when he tells his own superior that Maria is snooping around about it, and he has given instructions to keep him from ever finding out about it. But Maria is not the only one who needs to worry about old acquaintances turning on him. For later, Mary ends up attacked by a female vampire who knows him well as Bloody Mary. but is shocked to discover that Mary does not recognize her. She goes to Maria, hoping to help and clarify a few points, as well as informing Maria that his church has a special protection spell upon it that wards off vampires. Though Maria is not too enthusiastic about receiving any help from her, especially since her interests in helping him gain the power of exorcism are rooted in the fact that she very, very much wants Mary to die. Since Maria cannot read the ancient writing of some of the books, Mary is charged with that task, recognizing much of the language used in it, and even finds a diary from someone studying the concept of immortality, though no conclusive results on how to end such an immortality.
Much of this first volume is set up, my children, but it still contains the violence and fangs one would hope for in a story featuring such delightful bloodsuckers. Dummy day, my children! We have seen the new 52 Batgirl take on a monstrous horror born from an old legend. But how does she fare against a supervillain that's on the scarier side?
While Arnold Wesker is the most well-known character to play the ventriloquist, there have been a few, and this one is perhaps the most frightening. Meet a little girl named Shauna Belzer from 9 years ago, invited to another girl's birthday party because said girl's mother had made her invite her. She is saddened by how all the kids in her class seem to hate her, but fortunately, a nearby birthday clown and his ventriloquist dummy cheer her up. And how strange then that all the girls at the party get sick as she leaves, along with her new dummy, Ferdy, given to her by the clown. But oh no, it seems some juice has been spilled on his face.
And it's the best flavor of juice! Human!
In the present time, Shauna and Ferdy appear on Gotham's Got a Star, a little reality show where they tell some crude jokes to the judges, who don't take kindly to the ventriloquist act. However, despite their criticisms clearly disappointing her, they really shouldn't have said they could see her lips move. Ferdy gives one of the judges a big hug, with drills in his palms.
Ooh, impressive! I didn't even see her lips move!
Security comes in to try to stop her, but they get electrocuted in the process. Taking one of the judges hostage, Shauna and Ferdy drag her away so she can make them stars. Fortunately for the innocent judge, Batgirl comes swooping in to try to rescue her. Ferdy expresses how much wood he's getting for Batgirl. Her simply throws a batarang at them, which stops in midair and flies right back at her. Ferdy himself apparently has more mobility than one would think, getting launched at Batgirl with drills intent for her eyes. As police arrive to stop her, the ventriloquist throws her voice to make it seem like the talent judge is talking, saying that Batgirl was the one who kidnapped her. And due to the storyline going on at the time where the cops have a less than favorable opinion of Batgirl, they attack her while the ventriloquist gets away. She takes the judge to her home in the Gotham suburbs, and the dark house that contains the body of her parents sat upright next to her. And Shauna thinks that will really make them famous is if they can kill Batgirl. Soon, Barbara Gordon has already discovered Shauna's identity, and how everyone who crossed her ended up having terrible things happen to them.
Yeah, people had to watch her act. I kid, of course. Her act of murder and mayhem is wonderful and her jokes are hilarious. Shauna, call me.
Jealous of how Ferdy has been looking at the talent show judge, Shauna orders him to take her eyes. Before he can acquiesce though, Batgirl arrives. Although her presence is not unnoticed, she discovers the dead bodies of Shauna's parents, which get up and attack her, talking about what a great daughter they have. Their bodies are just meat for the ventriloquist to manipulate, and what bloody meat they are. Barbara says she'll have nightmares forever after all this, although for the time being, throwing up will do just fine. Ferdy attacks again, but before he can do much damage to her beyond her shoulders, Batgirl puts an explosive in his little body. It mostly survives, though very scorched. Still, it's enough to piss off Shauna, who sadly goes down with only one hit. But don't you worry, my children. this was not the end of this ventriloquist.
And perhaps sometime in the future we'll talk all about her and Ferdy's other escapades. And the blood that was spilled from their act. We all go a little mad sometimes, my children. And some go a little mad without any choice at all in it. So let us gaze back at those who would do so. The unsound.
Meet Ashley Granger, who's starting up a new job at St. Cassia. Originally founded in 1816, it was a mental institution meant to provide short and long-term care for patients of varying pathologies and intensities. It was closed in the 80s due to a lack of funding, or the patients sent out into the world with nowhere to go and no one to watch over them. But it has been reopened in the last 3 years, and it is severely understaffed and overpopulated. Ashley meets her rather stiff and standoffish boss, Nurse Jeffers, who does a limited amount of training to try to inform her of her duties on the various dangers of the place. It's a rough day as it is, since 3 higher-up individuals are observing things that day. And what's more, Ashley has found a razor blade casually left in the lobby. Jeffers says that someone has been leaving them around, probably as some sort of prank, but they don't know who's responsible. The day is made even weirder when she hears a voice coming from the bed inside the nurse's office, talking of how the prince sees her and is eager to meet her, and when she uncovers the sheet, she finds only a mannequin. She meets others, Claire, the girl who claims to not belong there, Josh, another orderly who brings Claire over to the officials in their rather wrinkly silhouettes, several patients who tell Ashley that the bells are tolling and the prince is calling, and Xerxes with a paper plate mask, whose eyes come along with him when he spins it upside down. Ashley is eventually confronted by the 3 patients who had told her the bells were tolling, telling her that she needs a gown made of red if she is to impress the prince. So they'll happily help by rubbing their bloody hands all over her. Xerxes warns them off, this entire encounter very strange not only to her, but to the head of St. Cassia, Dr. Kearney, but he seems to treat her almost like she was one of his patients. But he's going to be the one who needs help, because during the conversation, the patients riot. It might have something to do with the razor blades falling down on everyone, on some patients going on stabbing sprees. With no phone signals and the lines cut, the remaining staff members and few patients with the cognition necessary to recognize how bad this is try to make their escape. The rioting patients talk of blessings from Ashley, that bells are calling for her, and that the prince demands her presence. They can't get to the main entrance, but they think they can sneak out through the catatonic ward, which really doesn't work as the catatonics begin getting up to pursue them. Xerxes intercepts them and says he can help them escape, telling them to put on masks like his as disguises from the patients. Though the masks themselves show off more than that. Doorways and colors and a surreal, almost nightmarish underworld to this place. Space distorts, images and faces and creatures surround them, and they dare not take off their masks, lest they fall victim to some of the horrors of this place. Ashley continually questions what is going on, what this place is, not helped by them emerging out of the bizarre realm into an area of St. Cassia that has long since been abandoned. And he tells them of what it was like when he was here before the place was shut down in the 80s. Some patients deciding to help others like the doctors had done, creating their own faux hospital in the sub-basements. But then the prince abandoned them. Dr. Kearney gets captured by some feral children and beaten like a piñata. But when they cut him open, it's not blood that emerges, but razor blades. When Ashley refuses to wear her mask anymore, a doctor with a less corporeal head appears, encouraging the staff to have their own little group session. And they have little choice, as one staff member who tries to escape gets torn apart by ghostly figures, all that remains of him just a blood puddle. In the group therapy, we learned so many dark things about these people. How Josh is not really a staffer, but a patient who murdered an orderly and took their place. The 3 corporate representatives had been the ones to encourage it, since he wanted to be noticed, to spend time with the staffers who had helped him when he was more out of control. Then there's Ashley. Her secret is more bizarre. She wants to help people because she couldn't help anyone. Like when her family began spontaneously taking razor blades to themselves with a smile. And then people began calling her Mother of Blades. Even the social worker who came to check on her started doing it, and she has never understood why. The other staffers think that she is the one they want and decide to sacrifice her to the patients, blood spilling on her scrubs until they are a deep red, and the truth is finally revealed. As said before, the patients of St. Cassia took over the duties of the doctors when the place closed. But there were 7 in particular. The 7 Insanities, aka the Unsound. They led the patients to the hidden city beneath the hospital, showed them the madness below while they still kept watch. But then the Unsound left, abandoned them. They went into the world above to spread the gospel of madness to mankind. They were the Weeping Shadow, the Shattered Mirror, the Dancing Devil, the Reformed Saint, the Wandering Liar, the Idiot Prince, and the Mother of Blades. Ashley denies that she is the Mother of Blades, but Xerxes, the Idiot Prince himself, soon elaborates that indeed she is, a power passed on to her from her own mother, who is likewise the original Mother of Blades. They want to bring the rest of the Unsound back to St. Cassia, and believes that the return of the Mother of Blades is key to this. Ashley does not want to stay, though he says that the Unsound fooled themselves into thinking they were human, and the weight of the lie would crush them if they reject it. Still, Ashley refuses to stay, revealing the corporate representatives to be something else entirely. The prince realizes he cannot keep Ashley there even if he wanted to. She's been away for too long. She is let go, the red fading from her attire as she returns to the outside world. After all, the world isn't as far as you think. When she emerges, St. Cassia has been closed for years. Ashley confronts her mother at a psychiatric hospital with the truth, and she does not deny it, though she warns Ashley that the world is going mad because of the Unsound. They're still out there doing their missionary work, though Ashley's mother believes that Ashley is stronger than her and can defeat them, and she won't have to look for them. They'll find her.
Remember, my children, above all else, it is best to help one another. Pain is universal, be it physical, mental, or spiritual. And we must all do our part to aid each other, or we die alone. Steamed hams, my children! Yes, of course, the Simpsons have their own little comic book. We've even looked at an issue before. So let's once again climb up and enter the Treehouse of Horror.
Much like how the regular Treehouse of Horror episodes have dealt with multiple tales of zombies, this particular issue has 4 tales of the undead that Springfield must contend with. The first is Zombie-nado. People are gathered at Reverend Lovejoy's church, praying for the zombies to disappear.
Because Mark 11:24 says that whatever we ask for in prayer shall be yours. And Bart prayed for a zombie apocalypse. Oh!
Krusty, being Jewish, realizes he really has no place here and that prayer won't work, and foolishly removes the chains on the door. Fortunately, however, a tornado hits that sweeps the zombies away and brings them toward Shelbyville. Unfortunately, Homer and Chief Wiggum mocking Shelbyville for this misfortune causes the tornado to shift direction back towards them. Homer and Marge take the kid to shelter while he goes hunting for supplies, which he quickly eats because donuts. He ends up swept up in a tornado and is bitten by zombies. He no longer craves donuts, but brains instead, which he finds in the heads of the other zombies. With the zombies dealt with, the tornado dissipates, leaving Homer as the sole zombie to hunt his friends and family. And thus we enter The Walking Dead. In this story, zombies have already overrun the town, leaving the remaining survivors to set up a makeshift sanctuary, with Homer as the mayor. Unfortunately, while his raids for supplies prove successful, they keep resulting in those accompanying him dying. But hey, Homer gets the rich Texan's hat! Flanders convinces him that maybe they need to go on less dangerous raids, resulting in a raid that gets a bunch of people killed. He claims that this raid of the Duff Brewery was unsuccessful, but Flanders finds him with an entire sack full of beer. Leading him to a cemetery to talk, Flanders tries to convince him that he needs to change his selfish behavior. But the zombies attack, and Flanders will only bring him back if he promises to change his ways. When he refuses to give up total power and authority, the zombie of Frank Grimes rises up to show how unimpressed he is, forcing Ned to run back to the others and lead them to safety, inspired by the angels of his dead loves. Dusk of the No-Brainers sees the school kids going to the mall for their field trip, namely because it was a cheaper field trip than the go-kart place they had originally planned. A zombie outbreak hits, namely thanks to Professor Frinks' new anti-brain freeze squishy formula, installed at the Quickie Mart, and already the zombies are reaching the mall. Principal Skinner thinks they should just surrender. The zombies might retreat if they eat a few of them. But of course, Bart is not an idiot and recommends they barricade themselves in the mall. They quickly lock down the mall as Bart taunts the undead, and the kids enjoy the perks of living in a mall, including all the staffers at the stores too. Unfortunately, Principal Skinner's mother is a zombie outside, and she gets him to open the door. Some flee, some hide, some become Teenage Mutant Ninjimbo Turtles, but ultimately Bart is the hero, tossing some orange Uncle Julio at the zombie, which causes them to melt. The kids go out to save the town armed with their smoothies, and above the earth, Kang and Kodos lament how their zombie virus has failed. Next year, they'll try a giant jelly-like glob to devour the human race. And finally we have power plants versus zombies. Bart is at the power plant with Homer, enjoying Take Your Kid to Work Day. Or rather, not enjoying it. It's so boring there. Still, inspired by his whining, Homer takes Bart to the top secret room, which features some kind of strange rock that fell from space. Naturally, the two play catch with it. When Mr. Burns and Smithers enter, the two flee with the rock, and anyone unprotected that they pass get turned into zombies. Bart tosses the rock out of the power plant, hoping it will stop the zombies, and unfortunately, it lands in the Springfield Community Barbecue. Fleeing to the cafeteria, Homer gets an idea, squirting barbecue sauce on the zombies so that they want to eat each other instead. With the zombies outside threatening to come in, the two come up with a new idea: mutate some creatures to fight the zombies for them. The only thing they have is some weeks-old salads Marge had packed for Homer, and thus they create mutant plants to fight the zombies. Mutant iceberg lettuce, nuke cumbers, hell peppers. They're all able to repel the zombies. At least until Lisa and the vegetarian zombies arrive to eat the plants. Fortunately, Bart is able to convince the zombies not to eat them. After all, their brains are dumb. They started this whole thing. As such, they instead lead them to a college graduation, where the zombies eat the graduates as they exit the stage.
Whether you still like The Simpsons or not these days, it's still fun to know that they can always provide some laughs and screams. Nothing nice for Nazis, my children. There are kinds of horror we like, my children, and then there are things from the real world that we wish to see die. So, let's see some Nazis killed by monsters, shall we?
It is southern France in 1944, and a group of French resistance fighters find themselves attacked by some kind of wild boar. While nearby, Colonel Karl Wilhelm Scherer and his troops are driving along a road, only to be ambushed by members of the 101st Airborne and their new CO, Sergeant Jacques de Lacy. They take Scherer and a few other members of his entourage prisoner, hoping they can interrogate him on details concerning a new German offensive in the Ardennes. But on their way back, something runs across the road and forces their vehicle to crash, killing a few of the Americans, but leaving enough to hold their hostages. Fortunately, they're only a few miles from a town, so they figure they can hole up there for the night once they arrive. Scherer tries to make small talk with DeLacy, who wants nothing of what the Nazi is peddling. Though Scherer does point out that given how DeLacy clearly was a recent replacement, perhaps his men are not so loyal to him if their situation were to turn around. They won't have to wait long for that though. On the way, they find slaughtered cattle and people, eventually arriving in the town and finding no one about. Soon, the sounds of roars fill the area, and one of the American troops is grabbed by something that lifts him into the air. These strange creatures might be zombies, though it is clearly a more mutated form if that is the case. Sharper, elongated teeth, wider jaws. And, well, the whole grabbing a man and lifting him into the air thing is kind of weird for zombies.
Then again, we have seen superhero zombies before. Maybe this is where the Hunger Gospel ended up after Marvel Zombies?
Still, like zombies, a headshot will take them out. Though that is small comfort to all the troops who are taken and devoured by the creature. Scherer gets shotter, and they drag him to a nearby castle, where survivors from the town are holding up. The townspeople are naturally upset at the presence of the German soldiers, so this being a castle, they're locked in a dungeon. Scherer, however, will need a blood transfusion. Their only hope is a clinic at the center of town. They do need to keep him alive if they hope to get information out of him later. On the subject of information, one of the townspeople becomes infected by the same plague that turned them into monsters, and they decide to lock him in another dungeon so they can observe, perhaps gain some knowledge on how to fight off the creatures. Unfortunately, the Germans do not stay in the same area. With the need to get the blood, and the need to protect the townspeople, the Nazi troops are recruited to assist. While they're out, they take as many supplies as they can, raiding bread and medicine, the recruited sniper able to take out some of the attacking beasts. With Scherer back up to snuff, he points out that the Americans come from a new world. In the old one, villages can disappear overnight with no one learning of their fight. With no other choice, they must form an alliance with them. The war, for now, is over, but it will resume once the crisis is past. Down in the cell, they learn that the creatures sense things by heat. A torch fire is so distracting to them that they do not even care about the people. They make a plan, repairing an old car and attaching a wagon to it. And of course the Nazis remind us that they are the worst when one tries to assault one of the French peasants, unsuccessfully thanks to one of the soldiers. Unfortunately, we also learn that Sergeant DeLacy has been infected by the creatures, meaning he only has about 16 hours before he becomes like them. They plan to distract the creatures with Molotov cocktails, but when one of the Nazis tries to escape on his own, the ensuing fight allows the creatures to breach their defenses. DeLacy sacrifices himself to buy them some time to get away, having earlier instructed Scherer to kill him if he should start to change, which he is only happy to do. They make it out, though lose some people in the escape attempt, even crossing a bridge and setting it ablaze with some of the creatures on it. They reach American soil, and Scherer begins writing a letter while in custody. To whom is not certain, but what he does have on him is a red liquid, probably blood, and possibly the source of this whole calamity.
For now, the creatures are killed. One group of monsters slain, although there are always those that need the same treatment, especially when marching under a swastika. I rise again amidst fire and stone, my children. And so does our beloved Alien vs. Predator franchise. It's time for the third chapter of this tale, spanning all the franchises. So let's see what the Predator's introduction into the story will yield.
The story picks up from the first chapter of the Fire and Stone saga, the Prometheus portion. In that, a group of mutineers led by Security Chief Galgo elected to leave their compatriots behind on LV-223 and head for greener pastures after their encounters with the xenomorphs. During that time, astrologist Francis Lane had injected some of the black goo into their android, Eldon, in the hopes of uncovering its secrets, and instead created some kind of creature that the xenomorphs are all too happy to work with. Now on their way back to human territory, Galgo prepares his crew, along with the captured Francis, to be placed in cryosleep for the 2-year journey back, only to be stopped by Eldon, in command of a ship infested with xenomorphs. He demands that Francis be turned over to him, and Galgo is only too happy to do so. But it seems their little reunion is interrupted by some new guests. Predators! Their arrival spooks Eldon, thinking it's some kind of plot against him, and sends Galgo and Francis running. While the Predators deal with the robot janitors turned security guards, the xenomorphs go on a hunt through the ship to slaughter the humans. The Predators confront Galgo and Francis, stabbing the latter in the arm, but a shot from a stolen engineer gun kills one of the hunters rather effectively. Galgo separates from Francis and takes one of their 2 ships, the Percy's, and flies off, leaving Francis to Eldon and his megalomaniacal ranting about life and death. At least until Eldon comes face to face with a predator that shoots him. Unfortunately, the hole in his stomach regenerates, and he and his xenomorph pets engage the predators. It seems his new stomach even comes with some new tricks, like a mouth that shoots out to bite at a predator arm. He rips open one of the predators by its jaw as he continues his rambling, its compatriot finishing up some xenomorphs and recognizing Eldon's accomplishment. It burns his head in the traditional manner of the hunters, though the acid wound heals quickly, and Eldon is all too happy to let it go and continue his search for Francis. However, it seems he was a bit too quick to walk away, since the predator whose head he tore up has his head healed by the black goo.
Admittedly, my children, he is still a bit of an ugly mother hunter, but it is better than not having half your face.
The mutation continues, creating some kind of super predator, one that quickly kills its former compatriot. While Francis runs afoul of another predator, while realizing a method of finally curing his cancer with Eldon's help, it seems Eldon's own mutation makes him unrecognizable to the other xenomorphs, who attack him. The predator, however, seems to recognize that Eldon is already dying and tosses him aside, aiding Eldon in defeating the xenomorphs. Francis finally traps Eldon and gains a sample of the accelerant in his blood, thinking he can control it to finally cure himself. He injects himself with it, and it does not go well for him. The predator attacks Eldon when he attempts to help Francis, Eldon believing that the honor brand put on him was actually something to mark him as prey. Or perhaps the hunter simply doesn't agree with making such a creature one of them. Who knows? In any case, Eldon leaves the predator to some xenomorphs, while the mutated predator seems to find a kindred spirit in the mutating Francis, though he doesn't agree, attacking the mutated predator. A final alliance is made between Eldon and the mutated Francis as they kill the mutated predator, and the two finally get to have their little talk. Francis tells Eldon that he is his legacy, living forever. And he dies. It seems the accelerant was not enough and his body just melts away, leaving barely anything left. Eldon takes the remaining xenomorphs, who now seem disinclined to attack him, and flies off, wondering if he can convince them to stop hunting and killing. And hey, they've got all of forever to figure that out.
The Fire and Stone saga is nearing the end, my children. What futures are there for Eldon, for Galgo, for any of those left alive in this bloodbath? Well, I suppose we'll find out eventually. Rise from your graves, my children! Oh, is that too difficult a task to do? You wouldn't think so reading this story.
A woman in the woods watches as a leaf in a ditch spontaneously catches fire, and underneath that leaf, the titular Rachel crawls out of the shallow grave she was buried in.
Well, short story, my children, but I think you get the gist of it.
The woman soon vanishes as Rachel stumbles out of the woods, her eyes odd and bloodshot, marks on her neck indicating that she had been strangled. A passing car picks her up and brings her home, where she washes up and tries to reconnect the pieces of what happened to her. While a nearby acquaintance recognizes her fine, another says that she's not Rachel at all. Finding her old school friend, Aunt Johnny, at the mortuary, she leads him back to the place where she was buried. He doesn't really believe it's her either, given her condition. Aunt thinks he's just been working on the dead for far too long, but after showing him her shallow grave, he begins to believe it. They go to see Jet, another childhood friend of Rachel's, as she performs in her rock band at a club. As Rachel vomits into a sink a piece of rope, she talks to a woman in the bathroom and instinctively knows that she will not be getting married as planned, that she will soon be dead and something will be inside of her. This leads to the woman being rude to her fiancé after being shaken up by the encounter. The fiancé at the bar talking to the woman who had watched over Rachel as she rose, on said woman planting some terrible ideas in his head, jealous ones that make him very angry. Rachel spots the woman from the woods at the bar and follows her up to the roof. And the angry fiancé pushes his bride's body down some solar panels, hitting Rachel along the way, and both tumble off the roof to their deaths.
Rachel rising, Rachel falling.
Rachel recovers fine at the morgue, if you can call this a recovery, while the fiancé drags the dead body of his wife away, burying her in the same ditch that Rachel had been in, only to find a little girl with another corpse who needs some help. Yes, it seems while all this was going on, the mysterious woman was also talking to this little girl, and people around the girl start dying, including her own sister, whom she had brought out here to bury as well. When the fiancé expresses shock and horror at what he has done, she murders him too. Johnny contacts a colleague of his named Dr. Simon about the case, and he speculates that Rachel has been inhabited by the spirit of death itself. Mamalai! They reject his more spiritual interpretation of all this and continue to try to investigate. Though when Dr. Simon goes home, it seems he still likes to talk to the corpse of his dead wife, whom he tells she'll finally be able to rise again soon. Speaking of corpses rising, the fiancée rises up from her own shallow grave or encounters a passing motorist like Rachel had. Though when this one tries to feel her up, a snake shoots out of her mouth and attacks the man before slithering back into her. Rachel and friends run into the little girl, Zoe, who says the mysterious woman is a friend of hers who protects her, though she is very scared. Johnny and Jet don't see the mysterious woman when she appears, but Rachel does, even has a conversation with her. But her answers are vague, and she even changes her appearance to look a bit less modern in her clothing. She calls Rachel sister and wants her to remember something important before she vanishes. As they drive away, Zoe says that the mysterious woman is a witch, and they get into a car accident. Jet dies, Rachel is fine, Johnny's legs are crushed, and Zoe is nowhere to be found. But on the final page, in the morgue, Jet's eyes open.
Well, just the setup for more. Rachel Rising is an intriguing mystery, my children. The kind we love around here. Witches, murder, and the dead rising again. Would you have a little sister, my children? Look, it sounds way creepier when I say that. Fortunately, I'm not the one saying it. Be wary of that question when it happens, my children, for this is the twisted tale of Ibitsu.
Kazuki is an average young man trying to lead a normal life when he notices a girl in a gothic Lolita dress sitting in the garbage. He can tell how creepy and bizarre she is on sight and tries to avoid her, but then she asks the question, would he have a little sister? He has a little sister, Hikari, so he answers yes, not knowing of the curse he brings down on himself for answering the question. The tale of the gothic Lolita girl is an urban legend. One Kazuki begins living as the girl begins following him around, sneaking into his house, asking to use his sink so she can wash her rabbit doll. The one that squirts out disgusting, foul-smelling liquids when poked and prodded. After realizing that she's been sneaking into his home to clean it, watch him while he sleeps, and other such things, he tries to warn Hikari away to try to deal with her. But she doesn't recognize the threat, even mistaking her for a girlfriend at first when they talk. Jealous of the real sister, she attacks, calling her names and wanting to hurt her. Kazuki manages to save her, but it's clear the gothic Lolita girl won't take no for an answer, and fully intends to get Hikari so that she can be Kazuki's only sister. And soon she's on a killing spree, attacking Hikari's friend who tries to keep her away, killing a school official who Hikari could have run to for help. The police are no help, believing the urban legend to be just that, a fantasy that people are exaggerating for any number of reasons. It's less of an exaggeration when you're like poor Hikari, dragged away by the gothic Lolita girl for whatever reason. Learning more about the legend and its seeming connection to an abandoned mental hospital, Kazuki and two of his friends learn more about the hospital, of a doctor who began murdering people inside of it. After the two friends are murdered, Kazuki discovers the patient notes of a late doctor, and of their new patient in the gothic Lolita dress named Ramina. Her brothers had apparently abused her severely before murdering his parents, the trauma and abuse from it apparently driving her to her current state. After the continued self-harm as he tries to break her out of her mental state, he decides to play into her delusions, accept her being his little sister. Kazuki does the same, hoping this will be the end of it. It, of course, is not. After the gothic Lolita girl murders his own parents and boards him up in his home, she begins to abuse him too, breaking his body, forcing him to paint a portrait of her, and other wonderfully horrifying things to him. He discovers the rest of the doctor's journal, that accepting her as a little sister made things even worse, put into the same state as him. When she starts referring to herself as Hikari, he realizes the horrible truth. That the doctor who went crazy and killed some people, he was the same doctor who was her victim. And the story of that brother who abused her, well, she claimed to be his sister too. Kazuki makes a final plea to not let her kill him, and she has decided that he can indeed be her friend forever, by stuffing his remains into a rabbit. And poor Kazuki is blamed for murdering his family, letting the gothic Lolita girl get ready to claim her next victim.
Ibitsu is terrifying and twisted, my children. Perhaps you should always be respectful to your siblings. You'll never know what they might be going through. Or what they'll put you through. There's no escape from the House of Secrets, my children. And since that is the case, why not sit down and enjoy what the house has to offer?
Let's enter the first room of the house and behold the contortionist. Meet Percival Pope, a contortionist who wants his agent, Mr. Weasel, to book him an act.
Must have been desperate for an agent if he went with him after hearing that name.
Unfortunately, according to the good Mr. Weasel, his act is just not good enough. All of the contortionist poses he displays are pretty much anything one can find in a good yoga book. If he wants to get people's attention, he'll need to come up with a better act. And as he walks away, lamenting how much time he spent working on his contortionist act, a medallion drops down in front of him. But then witnesses its owner, an Indian guru, stretch his arm down 6 stories and pick it right back up again. He explains to Percival that it is the work of the sacred Puzzleberry, which grows atop the summit of a single mountain in India. He keeps some of the juice inside the medallion, and it is not for sale, for it is only to be used for meditation. Desperate, he knocks out the guru, accidentally killing him, and steals the medallion.
Behold the secret origin of Stretch Armstrong.
Soon, his stretching act is shown off to the world and he becomes very famous. However, the more he uses it, the longer it takes to snap his body back into position. Still, he's not greedy, and when he realizes that his body could become permanently stretched, he gives a final farewell performance. But soon afterwards, a crowd gathers outside of his house, desperately wanting attention and autographs. They grab at him, stretch at him, pull his body, until he becomes nothing but a flat, dead smear on the pavement. Next up is Killer Instinct, as we see a prize fighter named Steve Burns walloping on someone, until he finally stops punching him and just turns away, allowing his opponent to take him down. He explains later that he had been beating on the guy for 4 rounds and he didn't have the heart to finish him off. His wife tries to get him to quit since he lacks the killer instinct for fighting, but he refuses. Soon, however, a janitor meets with him. A devilish one who offers him the killer instinct for free. No strings attached. Unfortunately, the killer instinct starts to change him. He's more aggressive in training. He snaps at his wife, but he does start winning fights. Unfortunately, one night the killer instinct serves him too well, and he kills his opponent with a strong enough punch. Hearing about what he's done, his wife tries to leave him, and he murders her in a rage. The janitor shows up, offering to send him somewhere where no one will recognize him, and thus escape recognition for his crime, and he agrees, happy to sell his soul to get away. Unfortunately, the place he sends him to is ancient Rome and a gladiatorial arena where he must kill his opponents to survive. Steve, however, refuses to kill again and lets his opponent get back up and the crowd turns on him. But he doesn't mind. Even at the cost of his own soul, he'd rather it be this way. However, for some reason, he's allowed a second chance at life. He awakens after being knocked out by the opponent from the beginning, and decides to quit, explaining the whole thing to his wife. Though they both agree it's utterly ridiculous that he could have met the devil.
Well, of course he never met the devil, my children. He met the janitor. That's totally different. Monstrous morning, my children! When we're young, we have ways of coping with terrible things that happen to us. But they don't always last forever, and something that helped us cope might turn into something monstrous.
Hope Falls is like any old small town. A lot of people who don't talk about the bad things they know about. Out of fear, out of shame, but in the end, they just don't talk. Lexi has returned to town to bail out her brother, Cody, from jail, and to sadly inform him that their father died of a heart attack. Lexi got out of the town a long while ago, moved to the big city and all that, but most of the town is still there. Well, minus 1 or 2 police officers. Yes, it would seem that a giant shadow with very sharp teeth went and made a hole in Buzz Collins's roof, and made him into several pieces. We learned very quickly in flashbacks that things happened to Lexi and Cody when they were kids, perpetrated by the police department. Their father attempted to intervene on their behalf, but it only got him shot in the side and paralyzed from the waist down. They couldn't sue without evidence, and the town hushed it all up. With Lexi, she had bad dreams for a long while, her father encouraging her to take her nightmares and store them in little bottles and containers to make them go away, a habit that continues into her adulthood. However, Cody has taken to smashing the bottles nowadays and uncovering some of those nightmares. And it would seem those same nightmares have decided to take some revenge for them. Yes, indeed, the dark, crude creatures that can slice a man into many pieces just happen to match the drawings they made as children. There is never an explanation for how this is happening. It's like a Twilight Zone episode. It's just happening because it's happening. What's more important are the characters dealing with it. State authorities soon investigate and trace things back to the incident with Lexi and Cody, especially after one former cop, Maynard, is haunted by what they did to the kids and confesses his crimes to a priest. Right before a monster goes and gobbles him up, the priest snaps a photo of the monstrous things, the image allowing people to begin putting the pieces together about their connection to the kids. Soon, an officer named Harlan, ringleader of the former police gang, decides to take vengeance out on Lexi and Cody. He leads them out into a wheat field, where Cody is able to get his gun away from him and aim it at his head. It's only thanks to the encouragement of Lexi and the 2 state officers that Harlan will finally face justice that he gives up the gun. Though one of the state officers makes sure that Harlan gets a shot in his leg, no doubt because of the struggle. And with that, the monstrous things just die off on their own. The 2 victims could finally make some peace with what happened to them. though they don't stop drawing monstrous things either.
Something Monstrous is a simple tale of overcoming the terrible things that have happened to us and hopefully becoming better. Though no one will complain if some bad people get eaten by monsters too. She's everyone's type, my children! Time for another Halloween special that's a bit unorthodox. Celebrating the season before the season existed. Let's see how Red Sonja enjoys the best time of the year.
Of course, there is always a season of celebration in the world, even if it's not Samhain. So in the first of two stories, Curse of the Wolf, Red Sonja arrives in a village celebrating the Festival of Valahie, a time when the spirits of the dead are revisiting the world of the living. There are traditions, of course, putting a red dot on one's forehead, drawing a moon with a cocktail olive through it on doors.
Some traditions don't always translate, of course. Although it could be referring to moonshine, I guess.
And what a coincidence! Alcohol is what Red Sonja is looking for, while an old woman is looking for the aid of a warrior. Red Sonja wonders if it has to do with the howling of wolves, but the old woman there wants her son to be saved. Another in the bar commenting that it would be foolish to go help. Said son is out in the forest beyond the town borders. There are too many ghosts out that night, and they are quite hungry. Red Sonja, however, points out that anything that can touch her can also be touched by her blade, so she has little to fear.
Except perhaps for her catching a cold, considering she's wearing a chainmail bikini.
The other warrior, Connor, who warned her away, elects to go with Sonja so as not to be branded a coward, and already they attract the attention of ghosts, mere shades that are of no danger. But also the spirit of the sorcerer Kulan Gath, whom Sonja is only too happy to slice at once again. Still, he is like the shades, no actual danger to her, though he warns that the thing she hunts is dangerous enough to deal with her once and for all. Something that Connor learns as his head goes rolling out towards Sonja, a victim of a werewolf. Sonja battles the cursed creature and manages to behead it. The old woman emerges, admitting that this werewolf was her son. She hoped that a warrior like her would either free his soul, or he'd get a meal.
So, win-win for us too!
And secondly, there is Hail Halkus, which begins with Red Sonja in a trap, drugged by mead at a tavern, to be attacked by robed figures. She had almost been warned about it by a child working at the tavern. But in the end, she didn't really need the warning, as anyone able to go toe-to-toe with a werewolf is able to handle a few cultists. Unfortunately, Sonja was not the only sacrifice for the dread creature Halkus, as the child at the tavern has already been taken to it. Halkus begins to emerge from a portal, but fortunately Sonja arrives to put a stop to it. The cultist summoning it tries to discourage her, that he and Halkus breathe the same breath. But that just means Sonja can stab through two things at once. Well, thus, with the trick part of this little trick-or-treat complete, she gives the child some helpful words as the treat. Get a sword.
Well, I tend to prefer the creatures that go bump in the night, my children. I'm always partial to any situation with beheadings and stabbings too. So Red Sonja ends up the one being rooted for here. Never sleep again, my children! The Wildstorm Nightmare on Elm Street comics continue with another 3-issue story. The Demon of Sleep.
Freddy Krueger bags his latest victim, Miles Lowry, a bit of a brainiac for high school who gets himself slashed and chewed up to the point that the Springwood cops are not able to find his whole body, and it takes about a dozen bags for all the bits they do find.
I'm guessing suicide.
It seems Freddy's legend is spreading once again, in particular among those at Springwood High School, as a group of Miles's friends have already figured out that Freddy seems to like to target groups. And since they've all been seeing him in their dreams as of late, it would appear that the Advanced Learning Group is next. Still, it's a little hard to swallow, and since the one trying to convince them of this, Blaine, is a bit of a jerk, they figure he's playing mind games. At least until their friend, Hudson, has a dream about skateboarding down Freddy's claws. That ends with him sliced in half. So Blaine has been considering a plan. The ancient Aztecs believed that when you dreamed, you actually traveled to a realm ruled by Tezcatlipoca, and if you ever become trapped in your sleep, they would summon a demon named Nanhuaquez to come to your aid, destroy whatever dangers existed in the land of sleep. As such, Blaine's plan is to summon up Nanhuaquez to face Freddy. The blonde of the group, Felicity, says that it doesn't matter how crazy this plan sounds. She'll send out a 911 to Nanhuaquez, Buddha, or Pikachu if it'll save her.
I've got to admit, my children, I'd be down for Freddy versus Pikachu.
The teens break into a bulk discount store to perform the ritual necessary to bring out Nanhuaquez. Nanhuaquez?
Okay, my children, you can't give me crap for pronunciation issues here. They keep changing how they spell this thing.
Anyway, Felicity and one of Blaine's bullies are drugged. Felicity to be the bait for Freddy, and the bully to be the human sacrifice necessary to summon Nanhuaquez. And indeed, it seems the plan works, as the Aztec demon appears and begins fighting Freddy. Unfortunately, the ritual does not go to plan. One of the group, Sandu, thinks it's wrong to murder him like this, and thus the ritual is not complete, and Nanhuaquez is not strong enough to defeat Freddy. Felicity and the bully do their best to evade Freddy as he goes after them, but in the ensuing chase he is killed. Nanhuaquez reappears to fight Freddy, but then Felicity wakes up, awoken by the cops and security guards. It seems while they were out, Sandu and Wilhelmina murdered Blaine to make him the sacrifice. And the amulet they needed for Nanhuaquez slips off and breaks. It would seem this round goes to Kruger. And the cop, who seems to be aware of the events of the previous issues, seems to know something else was at play here than just some kids doing a cult ritual.
Yes, it would seem the good Mr. Kruger has evaded his own execution once again. But just remember, my children, in the realm of dreams, there are bad demons like Freddy, and good ones like Nanhuaquez. When there's no more room in hell, my children, the dead shall walk the earth. Yes, Dawn of the Dead is perhaps one of the greatest horror movies ever made. So, how does it fare in comic form?
Things have begun to fall apart, my children, as a producer named Fran wakes up in the news studio. Chaos has begun erupting all over the world as the dead get up and kill. Fran wants to stay around and report the news, even as it becomes clear that no one has any sense of professionalism left in the studio. Her boyfriend Steven telling her that they're going to leave together that night via helicopter. That same night, a group of policemen are storming a drug lab in an apartment building, clearing it out, only to run into the zombies making their way through as well. In the basement, officers Roger and Peter find that the inhabitants of the apartment have been keeping the zombies alive down there, since they still have respect for the dead. Though as a legless pastor comments to them, soon they will be stronger than them all.
The only way to respect the dead at this point is if you think you should be their lunch.
Roger and Peter meet up with Fran and Steven, the four departing in a helicopter up the coast in hope of finding some refuge from the zombies. After all, somebody has to survive all this, assuming anyone can. Eventually, the four discover an abandoned shopping mall and land on the roof. Climbing down, they discover supplies and resources that could serve them well, especially since Fran is pregnant with Steven's baby. And they devise a plan to seal off the entrances using nearby garbage trucks, then lock up the mall. After that, they'll clear away the zombies and live it up with an entire mall to themselves. The plan works, though not without casualties, as Roger ends up getting bitten twice during their efforts.
They got him, my children! They got him by the ass!
Thus, while they listen to a news broadcast wherein a man explains that the only way they'll make it through this is by acting unemotional, rational, and logical, Roger must be shot in the head by Peter as he succumbs to the zombie plague. Thus, for weeks, they stay in the mall, entertaining themselves however they can, even after the emergency broadcasts have stopped. By this point, Fran recognizes the horrible mistake they have made. Sure, it has allowed them to live longer, but it is stagnating them, keeping them in misery in all the vapid surroundings of the mall. There is no hope, there's only survival. And is that really living? Are they really no better than the creatures who still pound at the doors? Well, it's still certainly a step up from the biker gang that comes across the mall and decides to enter it, pushing the trucks out of the way, and going on a little shopping spree of their own. Peter thinks they should just let them go at it. After all, they still have to contend with all the zombies, and the bikers are only interested in all this stuff in the mall, versus the people living in it. But Stephen, angry because this was stuff they had taken already, engages them in combat. And thus, while several bikers are killed by our heroes or by the zombies, Stephen finds himself on the receiving end of some zombie bites. He inadvertently leads the zombies up to their hiding spot, where Fran wants to leave. But Peter has decided he can't go on, electing to take his own life. Until the last second, where he suddenly decides to shoot the zombies and escape with her, heading out into the dawn.
The comic adaptation is sadly not as well made as the film itself, my children. But it is still an enjoyable ride and tells the story accurately. And when the movie this old is adapted, well, it's almost like the dead are walking again. Happy Halloween, my children! And for tonight's final tale of terror in this year's Longbox of the Damned, it is time for something a little more classy, sophisticated, and intelligent. So, behold the tale of Sherlock Holmes as he fights zombies!
In London of 1854, a meteor crashes to Earth, pieces of it falling into various parts of the London water supply. A few months later, zombies begin to rise as a plague spreads through London. And yet this is apparently forgotten 44 years later, as Sherlock Holmes defeats a man who has been using hypnosis to learn the secrets of the wealthy of London. Until it is revealed that he is a robot!
Who knew I'd be covering another zombies versus robots tale, eh?
While Holmes studies the shockingly sophisticated automaton, which seemed to be controlled from afar, some workers in London unearth a segment of the town that contains a still functional zombie, which bites some workers. All but one are killed, the remaining ones soon turning into a zombie and being confined to a hospital. Inspector Lestrade summons Holmes for his assistance, but both parties are quickly told to hush up and cease their investigation into this matter by the Queen's Secret Service under pain of imprisonment. Of course, Holmes and Watson refuse to sit down when the dead are walking, so journey down into the construction tunnels themselves to find out the source of the zombie. Digging deeper into the tunnels, they discover an entire late Elizabethan street has been buried under London. Although the mystery deepens as well, as they discover a postman in his satchel, with letters dated from last July. Unfortunately, before they can consider that evidence, the zombies still under the ground rise up and begin their own march upon the famous duo. They are soon rescued by heavily armored individuals wielding an assortment of weapons that destroy the zombie horde. They're confronted by Sherlock's brother, Mycroft, who brings them away to explain everything. While in Whitechapel, Professor Moriarty shrugs off the loss of the zombies in the tunnel, proclaiming that the advantage of an army of the dead is that you can always make more. Also, he might be a zombie himself.
Would certainly explain how he and Holmes survived the whole Reichenbach Forest thing.
They bring up the real-life Dr. John Snow and Reverend Henry Whitehead, who in 1854 had traced a cholera outbreak through the contamination of water by human waste, which led to the replacement of the Broad Street pump. However, Mycroft says that there were more victims of the disease than what was popularly believed. Dr. Snow in this story spearheaded an effort to cut off the zombie uprising before it could spread any further, slaughtering all the infected in the area, and the matter was buried. Mycroft has no explanation for the recently infected down in the tunnels. Sherlock, however, speculates that they must have been deliberately infected for some nefarious purpose. Unfortunately, before they can speculate any further on who can do such a thing, Moriarty unleashes his army of the dead, forcing Holmes and Watson to flee back to Baker Street, where Holmes uncovers records of the comet's arrival on Earth and the speculation that microscopic life could have infected the water in 1854. And indeed, the book that postulates the theory of microscopic life was written by none other than Professor Moriarty. We see a flashback to, indeed, the fight at Reichenbach Falls.
Wait, I was right about that? Huh. See, this is why you should always pay attention to me first about these things, my children.
An assistant of Moriarty's retrieved his body and injected him with certain chemicals that, while at first made him crazed, restored him to life. Or a semblance of life, at least. Moriarty's designs are no less than world domination, an empire of the dead across the entire world. His servant, Sebastian, is less than enthusiastic about this, but Moriarty insists he take the formula. It needs to be administered to the living in order for their consciousness to remain after death, lest the alternative be ripped apart by his zombies. He flees, though they bite on his arm, proclaiming that Moriarty is mad. Although, as the good professor points out, he is a reanimated corpse with a barely reined-in craving for human flesh, and it is only now that he questions his sanity. On Baker Street, Holmes and Watson are holed up with their maid, Mrs. Hudson, trying to reason out a plan. But fortunately, aid finally comes. Tanks and military sent by Mycroft to retrieve them. Sebastian arrives, dying from his various bites, and warns Holmes of Moriarty's involvement and his plan for devastation and conquest. The British government withdraws to Windsor Castle, Moriarty claiming Buckingham for himself, asking Holmes for his assistance in combating Moriarty. They have Moriarty contained for the time being, but his forces grow stronger and will soon overrun them. Holmes' suggested tactic is to assassinate Moriarty. He is the one who directs the zombies, and they can be dealt with without his oversight. Unfortunately, to get to him, it will mean razing London to the ground, which Holmes encourages lest England become a fortress of the ravenous dead. They eventually authorize the plan, though they do not wish to send anyone in to try to personally deal with Moriarty, leaving him to burn with the rest of the dead. As such, Mycroft arranges for Holmes and Watson to be sent into England to try to deal with him directly. Thus, using his detective skills, Holmes tracks Moriarty back to Whitechapel, though he only finds an automaton of him waiting, revealing that he was behind the earlier robot, the hypnosis, an elaborate scheme to discover England's contingency plans in the event of some sort of insurgent army like this. Holmes challenges Moriarty to fight him face to face, but he refuses. He is reborn, a deity of the dead, and thus is above such petty conflict. Our heroes flee and head to Buckingham Palace, reasoning that such a madman will install himself on the throne of an empire at the appropriate locale. Holmes confronts Moriarty, who no longer wishes to fight in a gentlemanly fashion, and shoots at Holmes, who responds in kind by tossing a grenade at him.
Explosives really should be the final answer to any detective story, I think.
After a fight with his decaying corpse, Holmes is able to decapitate Moriarty as Watson launches a signal flare for the warships unleashing their payload on the city, in particular an airship that drops bombs on the palace. Holmes and Watson survive, and within 3 months the dead are cleared and the city begins being rebuilt, though they are forced to sign the Official Secrets Act to keep this information to themselves and out of print.
Must have been a really confusing weekend for any Londoners who survived then.
However, while Holmes remains optimistic about the new century dawning, it would seem that Moriarty survived and has begun new experiments in a hidden laboratory.
But that is a tale for another year, my children. This one ends. Autumn's descent is underway. As it gets colder, don't forget to open up a horror story during this winter. And warm yourself up on tales of fire burning away zombies.